Several years ago, I was using a dating app. It was all fun and games. Sometimes I met people for hookups, sometimes I didn't, and most of the time I didn't even reply to those who only sent me certain types of pictures unsolicited. One day, this guy shot me a message on there. He was and is 4 years younger than me, meaning he was 18 at the time and I was 22. I didn't really consider him my type, but at the same time, I also didn't think it would hurt to get to know him. I mean, looks are just looks, and there have been plenty of times where I fell for a guy not for looks but for personality, so maybe that could have been the case too. I just came out of a pretty toxic relationship that involved lots of cheating and trust issues and insecurities, so I wasn't really looking for a new one, but it did feel good to get positive attention. We started texting back and forth, nothing out of the ordinary, but I realized pretty soon that the part of his personality he let me experience consisted of not more than just being horny. And look, no slut shaming by the way, because I wasn't that opposed to it necessarily. As I said, I just had a nasty breakup and I was looking for fun, but that's beside the point. So I said yes, and we exchanged numbers, agreed on date, time, and place, and then we went back to our normal lives for now. I had a lot going on at the time. It was only a few months until I moved to a different place, so I already started planning for all of that, and not just that, but a friend of mine invited me to come with him on a trip to Amsterdam, which obviously had to be prepared as well since that trip was scheduled 2 weeks before I was supposed to move. Therefore, it comes to no one's surprise that I kind of forgot about the dude, until the day we were supposed to meet up. He texted me a few hours earlier to see if we were still clear. After I scolded myself for forgetting, I told him that we were meeting as planned, even though that would throw my schedule off a little bit. So, I got ready for the day, and I kid you not even an hour before we were supposed to meet, he canceled. I mean, not too big of a deal, it happens that you can't always make it. So we scheduled another day, when he proceeded to cancel as well. Cancellation after cancellation, week after week, 7 different dates. Each time it allegedly was a sick relative or pet. So clearly I took that as he didn't really want to meet me, which would be fine. I'm not everyone's type either, but he could have at least had the decency to not lead me on then. So I told him off about his shitty behavior and blocked him. Maybe that was a little of an overreaction, but I just didn't want to waste my time with a guy that seemingly always found excuses to meet me when I could focus on either the moving process, the vacation process, or another guy who was actually interested. But then he messages me on the dating app. How dare I block him? He wanted to meet me, but I was just an unappreciative bitch, I guess. Obviously, after that I blocked him on the app as well. I thought that I had heard the last of him, so I went on with my days. I already started forgetting him after a few weeks. And then another account messaged me. Fake pictures and all, but it didn't take long for me to figure out it was him. He basically admitted it in the first place, so another block followed. Another account, another block. Day after day. I thought, what was even going on? He didn't want to meet me first, and now he creates new accounts on the daily to contact me. What is going on? So I just had enough and wanted to tell him off again when he started to apologize for his behavior, saying that he was in the wrong and that he was willing to meet me if I was still willing to meet him. Trust me, I really wanted to blow him off, but if I just met him and he was just really bad at sex or something, he just never contacted me again. Stupid, but hey, it was worth a try. So we scheduled a meeting a few days before I was supposed to leave for the trip to Amsterdam, which I stupidly told him about. And since I didn't have a car, he offered to come to my place. Now, I would never ever give a stranger from the internet my address, but back then I did. I mean, he couldn't possibly be a creep or a murderer, right? So we met. He came into my house. We sat down on my bed and exchanged basic pleasantries. And then he stopped talking altogether. He didn't even look at me. Just to be safe, I wasn't a catfish. I looked exactly like I did in the pictures I had on the app. Only when I asked him something would he reply with very few words, until I asked him directly about if we'd hook up or not. Then he suddenly started kissing me and, well, I don't have to go into detail. So after that, he just sat next to me staring at the wall, not saying a word. At that point, I was pretty annoyed. I mean, I get being shy and all, but if it's that intense, how did you muster the courage to go on a hookup anyway? After I went to the bathroom to freshen up, I told him my roommates would be back soon, so he jumped up, said goodbye, and left. I got no other messages from him after. Fast forward to my trip to Amsterdam. My friend, let's call him Joe, and I had lots of fun roaming through the streets of Amsterdam day and night, relax in our pretty fancy hotel, and do the usual stuff tourists do. One day, we were just walking down a very busy road, very close to the main train station, when suddenly I heard a car honk loudly next to us. The traffic light was on red, so the person wasn't driving. I thought nothing of it and didn't even look until the guy started to call my name. That voice was very familiar, and the face that belonged to it was still in my memory. It was my hookup. When I looked, he smiled widely and called out for me to come over. But when he saw Joe, who at that point asked me who that was, the smile faded. I was dumbstruck, so I didn't say anything, but that wasn't necessary. The traffic light just turned green. People started getting agitated that my hookup wouldn't immediately go, so finally he focused on the road again and drove off. That was a hell of a coincidence, right? That he would be in Amsterdam at the same time, but why wouldn't he say so when I told him my plans? If he didn't want me to know, why call out to me in the middle of a busy road? I didn't allow my mind to think about him intentionally going there to find me. That was impossible. He wasn't interested in me anyway, right? Back at home, my phone started blowing up. Calls, texts, new profiles. It didn't matter that I told him to stop. And it didn't matter that I threatened to block him again. He told me that I was a slut for going out with another guy, despite being in a relationship with him, that I was like everybody else, and that he deserved better than me. Then he said that he had just been coming to Amsterdam for me, to surprise me. When I tell you I changed my number and deleted the dating app quicker than I possibly could have dreamt of, I mean I sprinted to my car and drove to the closest shop to get a new number. Not long after, I moved into the new place. I had 2 new roommates that were both in the same college course as I was. We got along fine and the house was pretty big. One of my roommates inherited it from her mom. The moving went smoothly. I didn't get another text, and I didn't get any messages on my social media, and he didn't even show up to my old place. Eventually, a few months later, I basically forgot again. For more context, the house was in a village. Not even a small town, but a village. There were no shops, no nothing at all. Shopping we'd have to do in the next town that was approximately 4 miles away. My room was on the ground floor. The window of that room was right next to the entrance door when you were looking at the house from the outside. And right beside my room outside was the carport. The ground was covered in gravel, and once anyone moved, the light of the carport would turn on. It was a pretty hot summer, so I sometimes slept with my window open. Wasn't that afraid because once again, it was a small village, and barely anybody would drive through there. So one night I was just sleeping. I even had my back turned towards the window, and then I started to hear someone walking on the gravel towards my window. Immediately I turned around, of course, and saw a guy walking past my window. Though he didn't look inside. He walked to the mailbox and seemed to throw something inside, then he left again. I was stunned for a few seconds, but at least it wasn't a murderer, I thought. So as soon as I could move, I closed the window and kept it closed each night from that point onward. This actually happened a few nights. Somebody would walk to our mailbox in the middle of the night, but nothing was ever inside, at least that I knew of. It was weird, but maybe one of my roommates was receiving something personal that they just didn't want to share. Cut to a few nights later, I was minding my own business when I suddenly heard some gravel again. My roommates had just gone to bed a half an hour ago, and I didn't hear anybody leave, so I thought it was just the mailbox guy. But this time, he didn't walk to the mailbox. He just walked to the carport. I know that because the light turned on. Immediately, I texted my roommates about a guy in our carport. One of my roommates, Sarah, who had her room across the hallway from mine, while Mary, the other roommate, had hers upstairs, texted back into our group chat that we'd meet with weapons at the bottom of the stairs to investigate. I grabbed a pair of scissors I had in my room and went to our meeting point. Turns out my weapons were the most useful since Mary came downstairs with a ukulele and Sarah thought an empty plastic bottle would suffice. After laughing at the absurdity of our weapons of choice, we started getting back in serious mode, going to the side door that led to the carport. Sarah looked through the window of said door but didn't see anyone. The light was turned off too. Just in that moment, we heard someone tampering with our mailbox again. Not gonna lie, I probably peed my pants a little bit here. Immediately, we ran to the front door, opened it and looked outside, but there was no one. At least not that we could see. After a look in the mailbox, which was empty of course, we went back inside. Not even 2 minutes later, I got a text from an unknown number saying how cute I looked in my nightgown. That no makeup even made me look prettier. He hoped that I'd come out alone so we could have some fun together like before I moved. But he was sad to find 2 other people with me. Needless to say, none of us slept that night. The police were called immediately and did a sweep, but nobody was found on the property. He didn't exactly say it, but I know it was that guy, so I filed a report the next day. Nothing really happened with it, but since nothing else happened like that, I thought he got the message when we called the police. Sometimes I still get messages from an unknown number, but they're pretty harmless, and I don't really bother any further when I ignore them. But the fear in the back of my mind that one day he could be back stays, of course. In the meantime, I took up self-defense classes. A If you were around and can remember, roll your mind's eye back to the weeks immediately following September 11th, 2001. Everything was America, particularly in the South and definitely in North Carolina where I lived. There are a large number of military installations there, including a very large army base about an hour from my hometown. Nearly every car had at minimum an American flag bumper sticker, and a frightening majority of people thought anybody who had skin darker than a potato chip was a terrorist. Everyone was hypervigilant, and many people took this as an excuse to become overly interested in the lives of their neighbors, sometimes out of concern for their neighbors' safety, sometimes out of concern for their own. I was 8 years old, and I was pretty sure my elementary school wasn't going to be the target of any massive terrorist attacks, and neither were my parents. So my brother and I continued to walk to school each day. There was never a problem. We walked to school every day that didn't have totally awful weather for almost all of my grade school existence. My neighborhood even had weekly paved trails, including one that led directly to my elementary school that we always took. I can't remember if it was recent rain flooding the creek besides the trail, or just the climate in general making the bugs come out in full force, but that week, my brother and I had decided to take a different route and walk along the road. This plan went off without a hitch until we were walking home one day in a big black SUV with tinted windows and giant American flags blocking the view of the back windscreen and back seat, slowed down to a crawl and then abruptly stopped in front of us and rolled down the window. The woman inside was blonde, maybe middle-aged, and wearing large sunglasses that obscured much of her face. "It's not safe for you to walk out here," she called out to us. My brother responded with something to the effect of, "Well, it's fine, we always walk home. We don't live that far." That was a mistake. She rolled up her window and drove a few feet away before screeching her tires to a halt and rapidly reversing back to us while rolling down her window, and she yelled, "You spat on my car." "I know you did. You just spit on my car and you need to get in right now so I can drive you home to your parents and you can apologize in front of them." I looked at my brother and we both shook our heads no, and I called back, "I didn't spit on your car. Look at the side." And then she yelled again, "Get in my car right now so I can take you home." I turned to my brother again, and without a word, we took off running into the woods. My heart was thumping in my chest, and I never turned back, particularly after I heard her door open and close. We just kept running. We switched back and forth through the streets and woods, taking several different paths, and finally ended up circling back around until we were home. We sort of just shrugged it off as, "That was weird," until maybe 15 years later when I told this story to a friend, and their eyes grew wide. And last laugh, "She was trying to kidnap you." It's haunted me ever since. I've recently posted another encounter here on Let's Not Meet in regard to something I experienced when working for one of my uncle's businesses, and coincidentally, he ended up calling me this morning. I told him about this subreddit and then subsequently explained what Reddit was, and that's when he chose to share this encounter with me. This is all verbatim and it's not exactly a short story, so it might trail off at some points, but I wanted to stay true to my uncle's account, hence it's word for word. Understandably, this will irritate some readers or listeners. The following is all from my uncle's perspective, and the use of I refers to him. This would have happened around 20 odd years ago, a very long time ago now, and it's when your father and I ran that call center, doing the contracting work for various businesses, all within the financial services industry, with roughly around 50 staff, including managers and supervisors, and so on and so on. Things were a lot different back then. The internet was still very much in its infancy, as was technology. We didn't have the same access to things as you would now if you ran the same kind of operation. On top of this, we were running all of this out of a warehouse on an industrial estate right next to a gypsy camp because that's all we could afford for the amount of floor space we needed. The campaign we were working on wasn't going so well for us for the most part. We just worked out of phone books and the like to get leads, as data cost a fortune and still does, so we were under a lot of stress to meet the sorts of deadlines and promises your father made to our B2B clients, so we weren't in a great place. We were facing the possibility of cutting the staff down to at most 20 agents with 2 managers, and that's when we met Kevin. We'd heard of him from a few associates who ran similar operations to ours as somebody who could provide leads and generally had the ability to turn companies around, so your dad got in contact with him and went from there, really. We didn't actually hear back for about a month after contacting him, so we were very much in the mindset of, well, screw all of this over. Close down and start something else somewhere else, and on the day we hyped ourselves up to tell everyone, you've all lost your jobs, We got a phone call out of the blue. Who was on the phone? Kevin. Long story short, we discussed our situation, discussed his situation, gauged his interest, and dressed things up with a little bow on the top to perk him up. And by the end of the call, he'd agreed to come down from Scotland to meet with us and discuss options in person. So on the Monday, we met with Kevin in the Hilton, and I didn't like him instantly. I thought he was overbearing, condescending even, and a complete egomaniac, but your father in his infinite wisdom decided to hear him out. And it turned out Kevin had a huge amount of leads from one of his sources in America and needed a team of salespeople to dial them. We'd need to supply 25 agents, and in return, we'd get a fat back-end payment which would allow us to move premises, upgrade equipment, etc. So we agreed and a contract was written up and we began our venture. In order to maintain a more hands-on approach to the business and to keep his contacts in the US happy, Kevin rented a flat close to the office and would often visit the office to monitor progress, if you will, which would normally consist of him lurking around with a coffee. It's also important to mention that Kevin had next to no people skills and struck me as either socially awkward or maybe somewhere on the autistic spectrum or something. And soon enough, we began to get complaints from some of our younger female staff members that Kevin would watch them too closely and even hover around the women's bathrooms, which, of course, we had to take very seriously, but we weren't really in the position to piss off the guy who was potentially our savior, so we would begin to hold bullshit meetings every time he showed up to get him off the floor and into the meeting room, which for a time worked, but eventually he would have to take a phone call halfway through and excuse himself. I later learned from one of the managers that he would hold the phone up to his ears and just watch the girls closely, not saying anything, and then follow them into the makeshift kitchen area and press himself up against them, or at least stand very close, to make them have to ask him to move or brush past him. We decided to hold a meeting with the female members of staff to ask them about their concerns and to ask them if we could do anything to make their time at work more enjoyable, deliberately not mentioning Kevin just to test the waters. And one by one, they all had something to say about Kevin. Some were just uncomfortable with his general demeanor, and some had been groped by him even propositioned, which was the final straw really, so we decided to speak with Kevin and cut ties and look at ways to exit the contract when we get an email from Kevin saying he's moving up to Scotland and will only be making quarterly visits, so we were understandably ecstatic that our lead source remains, but contact with staff will be limited, and we believe that no more problems shall arise, and we can wear the caring boss hats who valiantly drove away a sex pest, which would no doubt boost staff morale. Fast forward another 12 months, and Kevin's visits have all been non-eventful, and the contract is drawing to a close, and we are excited to get our cut and to expand and to move on to another primary contract when Kevin gets in touch with another plan to extend our contract and package our company up to be sold to a blue chip company which specializes in the financial services industry. He'd act as our broker and take a cut, but we'd make even more money than we originally thought as well, as half the agreed amount that we had received when this particular contract was supposed to end, just as a goodwill gesture. He mentioned that he had a few contracts in London and the US who would be interested in merging our operation into their current sales team for a more dynamic sales approach. So this was something to ponder on, and we agreed to get back to him. Anyway, I was thinking over the idea and decided to go to the local pub where I ran into a guy named Carl, who also ran a similar business to me, and we got to chatting, and he brought up Kevin, saying something along the lines of, "You're working with Kevin Smith, aren't you?" And unsure of how he knew that, I asked him why. "Why, do you want me to know?" To which he responded with, "That guy is a total nutcase, mate. Honestly, the things I could tell you about him." And at first I thought, here we go. This is just more gossip and BS, and most likely jealousy, but curiosity got the better of me and I asked, "Go on then, why is he a nutter?" And he laughed some more, took another few sips of his drink, and off the cuff said, "You know that geezer murdered his wife, yeah?" And admittedly I scoffed, but Carl's face was serious, stone-like and unsmiling. "No, he didn't," I said, still laughing. "Killed his wife, mate. I wouldn't make that up." I can always remember the look in his eyes when he told me that. I was unnerved, but still, you can't believe anyone in business these days, and I decided to probe him some more. "So what happened?" I asked for something to that effect. I don't know the whole story because he's kept it very quiet, obviously. You won't find it in the papers or on the news or anything like that. But basically, his wife was found battered. There were no signs of a break-in, and the only other DNA in the house was his. He's a wealthy guy, though. Never got out in the press, and he managed to get off, but I tell you, he's a dodgy bloke. We had him with us in '98, and we exited out of our contract and got loads of complaints about him. He's a perv. So I'm thinking, oh man, we have a murderer as a main source of income, and The guy's off his rocker, but I don't let on to Carl and instead tell your dad. And he says, he's fine. He's eccentric. He's from a different era and we should just hold out a bit longer. You know what your dad's like. He's got the moral compass of a bloody war criminal. But stupidly, I relented and we have entered the new contract, and true to his word, we received half the original agreed commission fee, so we were able to move offices, and this is when Kevin decided to move back down south and take permanent residency at our new office to oversee the packaging process. So he set himself up in an office opposite the hallway to the women's bathrooms and would spend most of his days on the phone just loitering again. By that time, we had a major staff overhaul and employed more skilled salespeople and management staff, so we were confident that Kevin would behave and he wouldn't have a repeat of last time. But unfortunately, this was short-lived as an admin assistant complained to HR that she saw Kevin having some alone time in his car outside while watching some of the girls who go outside to smoke. Obviously, this kickstarted the rumors of Kevin being a weirdo again, and his odd behavior did nothing to help that, so we decided to seek legal help, and eventually we were able to back out of the contract. Kevin in our minds was long gone, and it would have been in early '03 when I was working late at the office alone when I saw a figure moving through the office towards my enclosed office at the back. I knew it wasn't security or the cleaners, as security weren't permitted to enter offices without permission when a staff member was present, and the cleaners had left earlier. Besides, the cleaner we had was a rake-thin Asian woman, and this figure was now barreling towards me, which was much larger in both height and width. I stood up and moved towards the door to lock it when I saw Kevin's face on the other side. Now Kevin was a big guy, probably about 22 stone and around 6'4", and I must have been around 12 stone and 6'1", so he easily pushed back and barged in through the door. I can remember going for the phone to dial security when he got on top of me, and instead of the beating I was expecting him to try to pull the watch off from around my wrist. Confused but understandably mad, I tried getting him off me, but his weight was making it difficult, and I just remember him looking at me dead in the face without saying anything, eyes completely blank. Somehow I managed to get him off me. I think I managed to knee him or something and ran out to the reception area where I got security to apprehend Kevin, who was attempting to escape out of a fire exit. I wasn't hurt or anything and didn't press charges, and he got a warning from the police, and that was that. The last time I saw Kevin. Now this is when it gets bizarre. About 3 years ago, I bumped into Carl in Monaco, and we got talking about the old days when the topic of Crazy Kevin came up, and I told him about the time he got into my office, jumped on me and tried taking my Rolex, and Carl was laughing along with me and asked me when exactly that was. I told him it was in '03, and this is what he said. I can still remember it word for word. That couldn't have been long before he died then. Shocked, naturally, I asked him to repeat what he said to me, and he did. Yeah, he died in '03 and had no money at the end. I'm not sure if he told you, but he remarried this Thai girl who had a son. When he was liable to settle his contract with the American people, he tried bumping her off to get the life insurance money. Everything he had was financed. Everything. Didn't own anything. I was completely gobsmacked. Kevin never even wore a wedding ring, and in all the years I had known him, he never once discussed a wife or child. And although Carl is a bit of a shit stir, it turns out Kevin rented a house opposite Carl's brother-in-law. I tell you what makes the stories about his first wife seem more plausible. I've also worked out why he went for my wrist. I think at the time he was angry that we backed out of the contract, and he probably viewed us as responsible for his life spiraling out of control. So he probably did want to beat the shit out of me, but I think the fact that he had no money and probably needed it quick to settle the contract, and impending lawsuits made him decide to try and steal my watch to pawn it. The bastard. This is just my theory though, and he could have just been off his tits. That was the end of the conversation. I know some of you may find that hard to read or listen to, due to the length and the fact that he could trail off at some points, but I thought I'd share word for word with you as it adds more to the story. I've changed the name of the guy in question as well as my uncle's friend for anonymity purposes. It's definitely a strange one, I'll give you that. And if you have any questions about it, please comment and I'll call my uncle with your questions. I'm a university student in the southwest of England. I currently live in a house with 3 other girls, only 2 of whom are here at the moment in a somewhat dodgy area. My bedroom is the only one on the ground floor, with a back door that leads onto a small and discreet patio in the garden. It's semi-detached, so there are houses on either side and there's a lane behind the gardens with no street lighting. Recently, we've had bad weather in the area, so the dividing fence on one side has fallen down as well as some of the fencing to the lane belonging to the other houses. The first time it happened was at the end of December. My housemates were still at their parents' for the holidays, but I'd come back early to revise for an exam I had in January, so I was there alone. I always kept the back door of my bedroom locked, and I have blinds that cover the full length of the door and window with a gap probably around 3 inches in the middle. I was sitting on my bed with my laptop, and since I had the lights on, I couldn't clearly see outside as it was very dark. However, I kept thinking I could see something in my peripheral vision through the gap in the blinds. I wouldn't have been able to see anything outside unless it was close to the window. I looked up a few times and thought I saw something pale move away in the lower right-hand corner of the window and the door, which would have been directly by the gap. I figured I was probably just being paranoid and ignored it. Later on, I went upstairs and noticed through the hallway window that the people we share a lack of fence with were having people over. My bedroom is on the opposite side of the house, so my patio and window wouldn't have been visible to them unless they had come into the garden and walked over. Around 2 a.m., I heard what sounded like all their guests leaving and figured that someone may have drunkenly wandered over earlier on. At this point, I had all my lights off and was sat in my bed with my laptop and heard what sounded like somebody shuffling around outside. I immediately closed my laptop, so my room was completely dark and nobody would be able to see anything from outside. I crawled across the floor to the window and peeked through from the edge of the blinds on the right. There was a man crouched outside my door, trying to look through into my bedroom. I realized later that I should have made it obvious I knew he was there by yelling something at him, but at the same time, I was frozen solid in fear. I had absolutely no idea what to do. After a couple of minutes, he realized that he couldn't see anything with the lights off, had the nerve to tut, and then crept away. I debated calling the police, but decided I didn't really have any information for them, so it would be a waste of their time. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night, and I had no idea how long he had been watching me. I spoke to my landlord afterwards, and he's had a concrete wall put up between the garden and the alley. But the other fence with the gaps in belongs to the neighbors, whose landlord is in America and apparently impossible to get a hold of. So currently, there's still nothing securing our garden from next door and the lane. 2 nights ago, my boyfriend and I were in my room sitting on my bed and watching Netflix. Since the first time it happened, I've been massively paranoid and had nightmares about it happening again. So at first, I thought I might be imagining it. However, this time, I distinctly saw the upper right part of a face peering through the gap at us. He was wearing dark framed glasses. Immediately, I froze and whispered to my boyfriend that I could see someone, and I definitely wasn't imagining it. And don't move until we figure out how to react. He insisted that we could leave the room, and I went upstairs to the landing window and saw somebody walking off down the lane, but there was no one else in sight. Whether or not it was the same person, I'm not sure. I was quite upset that it had happened again, but thought the likelihood of him coming back twice in one night was rare and decided to talk to my landlord in the morning. We managed to hang a coat up over the gap in the blinds so you couldn't see into my room at all, even with the lights on. My boyfriend had work in the morning, so he left around 11 p.m. Literally within 5 minutes of him leaving, I was standing in my room facing away from the back door and deciding whether to watch more Netflix or to go to sleep. I heard some faint scuffling sounds and 2 clicks, but tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. It occurred to me a few minutes later that the clicking sound was the noise the door handle makes when somebody tries to open it and it's locked. As this was dawning on me and I was about to react, whoever was out there tried to pull my window open. It's important to note it's a tiny window. Even I couldn't fit through it. And it's at the top, so around 5 feet from the ground. It doesn't close all the way as the latch is broken, but I have a dream catcher with wind chimes hanging off the inside handle. So as they pulled it open, the wind chimes started rattling against the window. I was terrified at this point. I'm very small and have no idea how to defend myself, and somebody was actually attempting to enter my house through my bedroom. I have no idea how I summoned the courage to do it, but I whipped the blinds open and made a big deal out of slamming the window shut, then peered outside. I couldn't see anyone, so they must have run off. Straight away, I called my boyfriend who had just gotten home, who then came back and insisted I stay at his for the night. When I spoke to my landlord the next morning, he said he was going to get motion sensor intruder lights installed but couldn't fix the fence as it was the neighbor's landlord's property. I was still pretty freaked out, but I thought that the wind chimes rattling must have made it clear that trying to get in wouldn't go unnoticed and the gaps had been covered, so there wouldn't be any point in returning again. Last night, we made a thick covering over the blinds with a bunch of jackets and coats, so there was absolutely no way anyone could see in. I triple-checked the door was locked, took the key out, and attempted to wedge the window closed. Feeling safer, we smoked a joint each, and my boyfriend dozed off a while later. probably around midnight or a bit later. I got up and turned the lights off and put the light on my phone to make my way back to bed. Feeling really paranoid still, I decided to just peek through the blinds quickly to confirm that there was nobody there. The light on my phone made it slightly more difficult to see, but I saw somebody wearing a hoodie hunched outside. My hands were shaking and the side of the blind, balancing on the coat in the middle, slipped a little and rattled. I instantly let go and turned the light off on my phone, and a few moments later I saw a weak light coming from the other side turn off. I must have sat on the floor, not moving and listening intently for about 10 minutes, before I dared crawl back to bed. I woke my boyfriend but didn't explain what was happening properly, so he assured me that I couldn't have seen anything and I was probably just really baked. I spent most of the night staring at the blinds. I would have thought that the wind chimes would have put anybody off, but for them to come back the next night has really made me feel uncertain about what to do. I was thinking tonight I might try to set something up to see if anybody comes back, like tying some string a few inches from the ground across the entrance of the patio, as I'd be able to hear if anyone tripped over it. I also thought I might stay somewhere else and set my laptop webcam up to record the window at night with the screen turned off. I still haven't called the police as I still don't have much information and I feel like it would be wasting their time. I don't know what to do in order to feel safe in my home anymore. Edit. Sorry I didn't update before. I wasn't aware so many people were invested in hearing what happened. The past 2 nights I hung an enormous bedsheet across the entire wall with the door and window, so there was absolutely no way anybody would be able to see in. I removed the key from the door and wedged the window shut. The first night my boyfriend stayed with me. I nearly peeped out a few times during the night but stopped myself because I knew it would only make me more nervous, and last night I was here alone. I haven't heard anything specific at all either night. My landlord literally just came around about 20 minutes ago and he's bought a massive motion sensor intruder light that's going to go on the wall directly above my door and the window. And he's going to contribute some money to next door's landlord to get a concrete wall to put up to replace the broken fence. He's a really good landlord, you could say. He's very concerned about everything that's happening. He's also going to try and find a key for the broken window and see if it's just locked in that position or if it needs replacing. I'm feeling much better knowing that things are going to be sorted to prevent this from happening again, and since it's such a good place to live despite what happened, I'm going to stay here. Though when my lease finishes, I'm going to move into one of the rooms upstairs. And thank you so much for everyone that read and contributed. It was all fantastic advice and made me feel quite better knowing that I wasn't overreacting by being scared. I'm going to go to my neighbors and let them know what happened so they can be safe too, and if anything ever happens again, I will immediately call the police. I work in a nice place in the downtown part of my city. The place I work is upscale, but in an up-and-coming part of the town. It's still pretty rough at times with a lot of homeless and desperate people hanging around. I'm a 5'11" male, not a big dude at all. One night, I get done with my shift and go to sit at the bar for a quick drink before I head out. All night, wild things have been going on. Sirens, cops everywhere, way more people out than normal. Full moon type of stuff. So as I look outside and I see a bunch of clicks at the corner of the intersection I walk through to get to my car, no big deal. I try not to think much of it. They normally leave me alone. I finish up and ask for my tab, then pay it. While I am signing my name, I look to my left and I see these 2 dudes that have appeared in front of the window. They are peering in on the glass and just staring me the heck down. It was weird and they were slow to continue on their way, but they eventually kept walking. The bartender says, "Have a good night. Stay safe, it's been weird tonight." I immediately get that feeling of this doesn't feel right, but continue with getting my backpack from the back to leave. As I am walking out of the front, there are 3 decent sized cliques of, I don't want to assume and categorize people without knowing, but it's happening. Thugs. I don't recognize these guys because I know the homeless people and most of the guys that hang around. I knew none of these dudes. I start out down the sidewalk to the left and then I cross the street. I see one of the guys that was staring at me in group 2. He grins at me. The other one who was with him when staring at me is down the street on the opposite side in group 3. The guy in group 2 yells something to the guy in group 3 and then also says something to group 1. They are just now looking at me like I am a wounded animal and they are a pack of lions about to suit up. I try to ignore the extra ton of anxiety I am feeling and continue to walk my way down Death Row. At this point, I picked up my pace to a swift walk. I keep looking in the reflection of the windows to my right to see if they are behind me, but they are not. I continue my walk and now I feel like I'm in the clear. I feel this little bit of relief that I made it past. I am 3/4 of the way up the block and I hear a scuffle behind me. I get to the corner and turn my head to the right to see what's going on. I might as well have been staring death in the face because that's what it felt like. I felt like Frodo with the ring being chased by those dark horse riding things. That dude from the second click is right the heck there. He was behind me with his crew running up behind him. I don't know how, why, or what possessed me to swing, but before he could say anything, I threw a swing and connected. He gets knocked down, and I know I didn't hit him that hard. I don't know if he was just surprised by the fact that I did that, but he fell down. I then turn into Usain Bolt and tear my ass to the car. If somebody were clocking my 40-yard dash, I would have qualified for the Olympics. I hightailed it to my car, grabbed my keys, and thankful for automatic locks. I hit the button and unlocked it before I got to the door. I can hear all of the pieces of crap turning the corner as I am almost to my car. I can't really pick up what they're saying, but I imagine it's something along the lines of, "I'm going to gut you like a pig." These dudes were on a mission to make me eat shit. I reach my car and frantically toss my bag in, sit down and shove the key in the ignition. I am so thankful that real life isn't like horror movies because mine started up on the first try. As I slammed on the gas, I looked in the rearview mirror to see 6 or 7 of them just shy of reaching my car. Not more than a day later, I was on Facebook and somebody posted an article from the local news that a younger gentleman was killed, a block and a half from where I was. I don't know why or how, but I am so thankful to have lived through that. Hey, so this was a long time ago, so pardon if I can't remember all the details just right, but I know it definitely happened as others have commemorated my story over time. When I was in 2nd grade, I needed the bathroom, so I asked if I could go. The teacher gave me permission and I walked to the end of the hall near where it opened up to the playgrounds. We had legitimate lockdowns because of the danger in that area, especially since a big old gate was always open, even when the school was closed, on the edge of the playground near where I was going to do my business. As I turned into the bathroom, I could hear a man's voice harshly scolding somebody with some curse words. Now this was really odd because I was a girl going into the girls' bathroom, but I thought nothing of it and walked in, like the stupid kid I was. I saw a man sitting in the center stall with the door open, on an earbud. He looked up and saw me, and in that moment, I could tell something was wrong. His pants were down and his hand was pressed harshly to his head. His eyes looked crazy and he reached out to grab me. I jumped back a bit and he sat back down on the plot, his fist clenched. After that, he looked up at me again with an enraged expression and made a flurry of hand motions, screaming at me to get out. I ran outside and waited by the doorway waiting for him to finish, thinking he needed privacy and was just frustrated and embarrassed that I had caught him with the door open. I waited. After all, I still had to go. Time passed and he never left, just cussing and muttering angrily under his breath as I listened to him. I would have left and gone back to class, but at that age I had developed a freeze response to intense situations. My friend eventually came to get me, saying I was gone too long. I went back despite still needing to go, and I figured out I had been staying there over a half an hour, waiting to use the bathroom. When the teacher asked, I told her, and like the rest of the irresponsible teachers at that school, she just ignored it and said I was lying. I would have passed this off as just my imagination at best, or just a man having a bad day at worst, had it not been for what happened a year later. A woman I had never seen before came to talk to me about this man I had seen. I told her everything I could and asked, "Why so long? This happened a year ago. Why not interview me then?" She gave a nervous laugh and said something along the lines of, "More brave kids telling their teachers about this man, so it likely wasn't just my isolated incident that caused her to ask around about this guy." Looking back on it, I get the feeling the situation was likely much more serious than I was made to believe by my friends and teachers. If this doesn't belong here, please let me know. This story still haunts me to this day. This took place around 10 years ago when I was like 8 or 9. I lived in a pretty crappy neighborhood and what was at the time a really rundown city. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad at the same time. Just a few bad apples in the tree. Anyways, enough background on the neighborhood, now on to the main story. My friends and I loved to play outside. It was the only thing we could do. No one in the neighborhood could afford any sort of electronics or any sort of fun machine to play with. We loved to just run through people's yards, cutting through houses if they just so happened to leave their door open. Now, looking back on it, it is probably the dumbest thing kids our age could have been doing in a neighborhood like that. This story has nothing to do with running in people's houses. I just wanted to let you know how dumb kids we were. Well, On to one fateful day, we were playing hide and seek with 4 of us hiders and 1 of us seeker. We thought it would be a funny idea to go on the other side of the neighborhood so that the seeker could never find us and we would win. We like to call that part of the neighborhood the rich part because they had 2-story houses over there in a forest with a creek in it. We were just doing our usual thing, cutting through people's yards and jumping fences when we heard the loudest scream ever, maybe 4 or 5 houses down. After hopping off the fence that we had just jumped, we all stopped and looked around, wondering where it came from. I noticed that one of our hiders wasn't with us anymore. 3 of us left. "Where's Isaac?" I exclaimed. We heard the scream again. I pointed towards where the sound came from, and we all jumped back over the fence we just jumped from and ran towards the scream. When we thought we got to the spot where the screaming was coming from, there was nothing there but an empty lot of land and forest. We all started to get scared. Did Isaac get lost in the forest? Did he get taken back there? Then we heard the scream again. It was definitely Isaac. I decided to be the man out of all the other 8-year-olds and go into the forest to make sure Isaac was alright. As I started my way into the trees, I did one last look at my friends and saw how horrified their faces were. I knew at that moment that I was definitely the only one that could go down into the forest. Making my way in, I could feel all the heat in my body fading and some sort of dread starting to take over. As I walked further in, it started getting darker and harder to see. I was whispering, yelling my friend's name. He responded in the most shaken up voice. "Down here, be quiet." I finally got him and asked him what happened. He told me this story of how he got tired of running and decided to take a break on the curb to catch his breath, and that instead of being out in the open and risking the chance of being caught, he decided to go in the woods and hide. He said that after like 5 minutes after he sat down, he heard talking. Nothing that he could make out, just random nonsense. He looked around to see a man in a black hoodie hiding from a tree on the other side of the creek staring at him, but the man took off before my friend could even get up to run away. And this is where he said he started screaming at the top of his lungs and hid somewhere else in the forest, which is where both of us are now hiding. And I kid you not, as soon as he told me this, we heard a twig snap. We both look up to see the man looking for us in some of the shrubbery on the forest floor. I couldn't make out any facial expressions or anything on his face for that matter. I could see that he was holding some sort of blade. I couldn't tell if it was a stick or a machete. All I knew was that we needed to run. So when he turned his back, we got up and started running. We didn't care how loud we were. We just knew that we needed to run. We got out of the forest and told all of our friends to run as fast as they could down the street. We kept running until we got to the other side of the block and we all turned around to see the street empty. No one. Not a single car, and from a distance you could hear a roar or like a very loud engine. Shortly after that initial roar, a silver 2000s Mustang with the darkest windows comes peeling around the corner faster than I've ever seen a car go, heading straight toward us. I've never had my body tighten up like it had at that moment, when I knew it was the same guy from the forest. I told all of my friends to split and run into people's yards to hide. So as we were all hiding and running through alleyways and jumping fences, you could still hear his engine. It was like he was targeting only me. I can't even tell you how far I ran. I got to the point where I didn't even think I was in my neighborhood, but still, I heard his engine coming up on me, so I ran more. I was exhausted. The sun finally started to set and I could hear his engine fade. Almost like he had forgotten about me, or had just given up. I started making my way back home scared shitless, checking my back every so often to make sure I wasn't being followed. Once I made it home, I went right to bed to cry myself to sleep. And for months after that, that 2000 silver Mustang would follow us, stalking every corner that we played on. We'd see it at our school and at the grocery store. Heck, it could have been a coincidence that our little minds are not perceiving things around us, but either way I think he was stalking us. Nothing actually came of him following us. He never did what he did the first day, but it was still so scary seeing that car everywhere we went. I didn't know what to or how to tell my mom, so I didn't, and I still have it. This story is for the people on this sub and my 4 other friends. Funny enough, the seeker didn't know what happened until the day after when we were at school and we told him. He still doesn't believe us and says it was to go inside and have him looking for us all night. This is my first post to Let's Not Me, and for story context, I'm a 29 male to female who presents as masculine for work-related things like rideshare. Basically, this means I don't generally get tilted by people calling me he or him because, well, I don't pass. Anyway, so I use both apps, Uber and Lyft, and your girl usually doesn't have any problems. The riders are generally pretty nice and or quiet, and honestly, I enjoy giving my rides. Not a lot of money, but enough in between paychecks at my big girl job to be enjoyable to do when I can. However, as I was cruising off from a ride, I got a new request for like $20 to $30. Not uncommon, but sometimes that means it's far as shit. This one was only 45 minutes, so not too bad. Plus, money. So, I'm driving to the pickup pin, and it's at decently fancy Japanese grill and a kind of rundown dispensary. I park out of the way of traffic and hit arrive. 2 minutes. No one. 3 minutes. Somebody walks up and she gets to my door. Here's where the scary stuff starts. She doesn't immediately open it. She reaches for the handle, sure, but then she proceeds to lean completely forward against my rear passenger door and laugh. She's laughing into the pain. Then she bends all the way backwards to the point her legs are almost 45 degrees with her torso. She opens the door and apparently my last rider left something in the back seat and she stops laughing and starts snickering. I hit her with the, "Hi, are you rider's name?" In my forced masculine voice. In a creepily cutesy voice she says, "Yeah, that's me. Somebody's done dropped a thing in your back seat, Mr. Uberman." I notice it and ask to keep it in the front seat with me so I can return to it later. Oh damn, I guess she must have left it on accident. She stares not at me, but at the rearview mirror and says, "Aren't you going to call her?" I tell her I'll do it when a request comes in to return it like I usually do. Now a quick aside to explain the characterization of this woman I've made so far. I'm not going out of my way to be any kind of prejudice. She legitimately spoke this way. And beyond this, just a country vernacular, she spoke as if she couldn't read well. As somebody who's worked with people with traumatic mental disorders or people who are severely mentally disturbed or are neurodivergent as a volunteer, I try my best not to be annoyed or be a jerk in these situations. Anyways, we head off towards her destination about 45 minutes away. First red flag because the others so far could just be a rider being weird or drunk. She asked me to stop at a UPS store on her way to her destination. No big deal, right? Here's the issue. She didn't specify where. And as I opened up Google Maps to find the nearest one, she said, "Oh, you don't have to, but I have to get my friend out of jail. If I don't get this package, he's going to be there overnight." "Oh," I said, not getting what the package had to do with jail, but playing along. "Well, it's just he's going to be there all night. If we don't get him out, he's going to kill somebody. He's in jail for killing." Okay. When I freak out visibly but not audibly, she smiles and says, "Oh, we don't have to go there. Let's keep going back on the road. I know you Uber guys have to make your money." Yeah, Uber drivers don't have a lot of money, do they? Weird pivot, but we keep going and I nervously laugh and say, "Yeah, but I don't mind if you need me to stop." Wrong move. She continues to stare at me from the rear view every time I glance back. We are on the highway before she says anything. "I like this car. What car is this?" I tell her, "Oh, well, it's pretty nice. You like it?" I nod and say, "Oh yeah, it's a nice car." Then she turns to the empty seat next to her and starts arguing with the air. No, it's his car. I don't think he wants to do that. Stop it. I say, "Is everything okay?" "Oh, my friend just said this car's nice." "Oh," I say. I'm a bit freaked out now, but it's whatever. People are weird and you never know what's going on. It's not unusual for a grown woman to have imaginary friends, I guess. "Mr. Uberman, do you think it's okay to steal if you have to?" I just shrug and go, "I mean, what do you mean?" Like, if I were in a local grocery store and wanted bread, I should be able to take it, right? Especially if I work there. I shrug again. "Well, I'm not a thief. It's because I need it," she said. She turns around and yells at my trunk. "I got money. Right, Mr. Uberman? I got a job, so I got money." She's getting visually more agitated. Then she turns to her side and says, "What? No, you tell her to simmer down now. He's a nice man." And goes on this long rant about how she's not a vagabond and she's got a job, so she isn't poor. But those poor people like to pretend they're not poor, switching from the seat next to her to behind her. Eventually, she smirks and it's kind of off-putting because she's missing teeth. Now, do I necessarily care if someone is talking to themselves in a Lyft ride? No, I don't judge. Life is hard. But when her imaginary friends start to sound like they want me to die, I do mind. I don't necessarily like being alive, but I'm not going to let someone else decide that for me. Then I'm driving and keeping to myself, and she smirks in the rear view and says in a very scarily soft voice, "Aren't you sleepy? Are you hungry? They say you're real sleepy. Do you like boba?" I'm now gripping the steering wheel and avoiding eye contact. "Nah, I'm okay. Thank you for the offer. I'll pay if we stop," she says in her sing-song voice from earlier. "Let's stop. Maybe you could even pull over and nap for a bit." She's baring her teeth at this point, and I'm internally screaming that I want this ride over ASAP, but $20 is $20, so we keep moving. Well, you killed her, so it is what it is, she says randomly, looking at her side. So, new intel. She's talking to dead people. What in the space balls is going on? So now I'm even more concerned. We get to a stop sign and she stares at the headrest and leans forward. Oh, I forgot to mention, all of this is happening while she's sitting directly behind me. She leans forward and sticks out one bony finger and pokes my shoulder. How does your body feel, Mr. Uberman? Huh? Are you sure you don't want something to eat? I could feed you if you just pull over somewhere. It's like the 10th time she tried to get me to stop, and then she says, he's sleepy, isn't he? He's going to kill someone if he doesn't get some sleep. Sleep is going to die. He's got two choices. He chose. I ask, or who is going to kill someone? She looks aware and gets in an angry face. Nothing. No one. So eventually, after being death stared at and her imaginary ghost friends talking about robbing and or killing me, we get to her destination and she gets out. Ah, thank you for being so patient. Make sure you don't forget to eat, she says, with the deliberate pauses, and then she comes around to my windows and smiles against the glass. I drove home and didn't drive for Lyft for a week. So this is a true event that may appear more humorous than creepy, and to a degree it was, but it was also a very tense situation as witnessing someone snap right in front of you is unnerving and unpredictable always. Years ago I worked in the home office of a large corporation. Their building campus consisted of a few buildings and also leased out office space to several other companies, law offices, etc. So generally everyone around the building campus wore professional attire, and there were a lot of unfamiliar faces coming and going. One day at lunchtime, I, as well as many other people, was outside in the building's courtyard, enjoying the weather, sitting along a large statue that had a seating wall all around it. Suddenly, this heavy-set older man with a thick mustache, who reminded me of a large walrus, comes out of the main building's lobby in a nice suit and tie. So he looked generally just like everybody else around, and nobody expected what would come next. He walks straight and deliberately towards the statue area, and aggressively throws his briefcase towards the people sitting on it. Luckily, it fell short of striking anyone. Some people yelled and got up immediately and scattered away. He then approaches others still sitting there and starts angrily singing parts of Sinatra songs and other show tunes at the top of his lungs. He had snapped. He was getting in people's faces, screaming some of the lyrics to New York, New York, Yankee Doodle, and Hello Dolly. There was no smile, no look of comedy. He just had this look of rage and hate on his face. This made me wonder if he was just fired or had a terrible meeting, and now he was taking it out on everybody in his path. He scanned the people sitting there, and if he caught anyone laughing at his singing or making eye contact with him, he would get in their face, shout screaming these lyrics with a demented look on his face. I wasn't sure what to expect, if he was going to eventually attack somebody or somebody was going to hit him for his demeanor. He just kept it up and was screaming these outrageous songs as he paced back and forth, looking for somebody else to randomly scream at. I continued to sit there quietly and was trying to avoid eye contact so he wouldn't come up to me, but instead I was confused, concerned, and on guard, and to some degree, enjoying every minute of this strange spectacle. I almost laughed at the absurdity of this, as his singing sounded ridiculous. Every person he confronted just cautiously walked away from him as he shouted in their face. He just finished one of his angry songs, and there was a facilities worker who always reminded me of the rapper Eazy-E, just watching from across the courtyard while he was working. As soon as the angry guy took a pause, the facilities guy quickly did a loud la 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 in an operatic manner in response. That angry dude turned around so quick to see who was mocking him, and the facilities guy played it off pretty good, pretending he was just cleaning. The angry singer was shouting, "Who did that? I'll break your jaw," all scanning the people in that direction to see who to confront. Soon after, the building's security or police came and took him off the property. At times, when I hear about somebody who snapped and gunned down people at a workplace, it makes me wonder if things would have gone worse than this had he been armed. When I was 17 years old, there was a rumor that a back trail behind my street had devil worshippers who worshipped on it late at night. This was told to me by my friend's siblings. We'll call my friend number 1 Skylar. Skylar insisted that there was nothing there, and I believed her mostly. About a month after school ended, I was really bored though, so I texted friend number 2, we'll call her Carly, and asked if she wanted to check it out with me. She agreed, and our parents told us not to stay out past 10 o'clock. Carly and I spent too much time looking. Don't get your hopes up. There was nothing back there but country max and a freeway. When we walked back up to our street, it was 10:30 p.m. I could see my mom waiting for me, clearly mad. As I walked up my street towards my house, I saw an older man and my stomach immediately sank. He nodded at me as I passed him, and I nodded back just to be polite. I walked up further and turned back to see if he was staring at me. He was. I ran up to my mom and told her, "Mom, I know you're mad, but that guy is staring at me." And she looked at him, bit her lip, and took me into the house. About 3 days after the incident, my mom told me I needed to be careful outside because he was actively stalking our house. He would walk by in laps of 3. Well, one night I sat out a bit later after Mom had gone to bed, and I looked up and saw him walking up the sidewalk. I ran into the house and FaceTime friend number 3 that we'll call Alexis. When I was on the phone with Alexis, I heard somebody frantically rattle the front doorknob. I began bawling my eyes out from terror. This nightmare finally ended the next day when I was in the living room. He was making his usual rounds, stalking our house, and Mom noticed him trying to come up the front steps. She cleared her throat and he ran off. When your parents give you a curfew, please just obey them. It's for a reason. This is a story that's really been bothering me lately for absolutely no reason whatsoever. A few months back, I just had this dream that brought back this memory I tried to suppress growing up, but as of recently, it's been weighing on my mind. Growing up in 2005 on the edge of the suburbs, there was a large grove of trees and hills by some railway tracks that led to a big forest about half a mile from my house. When I was 9 years old, my neighborhood friends and I would ride our bikes to the railway tracks and walk to the forest to go explore the random pieces of furniture and junk in this peculiar forest. We'd play card games, do homework, and hang with friends out there for about an hour or two, but never sat out there too long. There were some small abandoned houses here and there in this forest that we stayed away from, as one neighborhood friend, Michael, told me there was a homeless man who lived in one of them, and if you saw him, you better run. So right off the bat, after hearing this, going near this house in the woods was scary as could be. One chilly November afternoon after school, I came home and dropped off my backpack at my house and immediately went to the woods. My bike was broken, so I walked. Michael had told me at school that day to meet him in this open area of the forest to play Pokemon with him. This was something we'd frequently do growing up, just to pass the time, until our parents got home at 4 p.m., so it was nothing out of the ordinary. As I crossed the railway tracks into the forest, I instantly felt a weird sensation, that feeling you feel when someone is obviously watching you. I looked all around and couldn't see anyone, so I thought I was just getting scared for no reason, as the rather overcast day was very eerie anyway. Trekking through the autumn leaves scattered across this large wooded area, I came upon the big open area where I was supposed to meet Michael. Near the area where we normally met was his notebook open. On the page was written, "Hey, I had to go back home and grab some batteries for my Game Boy. Wait for me here and I'll be back soon. Signed, Michael." I waited. Being alone, especially feeling like somebody was watching me, made this particular moment very uncomfortable. However, I convinced myself I was just being a wuss and decided to wait for him. I sat down and began playing my Game Boy. It wasn't too long until that sensation of being watched grew into utter paranoia. I kept frantically looking up from my Game Boy and checking my watch to see how long I'd been waiting. I'd been sitting there for about 30 minutes. It was beginning to get dark now. Then I heard some leaves crunch. I looked in the direction of the sound and briefly saw a dark hooded figure peeking from behind a few trees, hiding back behind them. My skin crawled and I immediately jumped up from where I was sitting and froze in my tracks, staring. I screamed hello to see if anybody was there. I was quickly reminded I wasn't alone when I saw this tall, dirty-looking hooded man peek back around from the trees. He called back, "Hey, buddy." I picked up Michael's notebook and ran for my life. I ran so fast, I barely had time to look behind me. However, I heard leaves crunching not too far behind. It was the man running after me. He was screaming for me to come back and, "I just wanted to talk to you. I'm sorry." I began crying as I was running, thinking this was exactly how those missing kids disappear. I ran and ran and ran until I literally tripped over the railway tracks and cut up my knees. Michael was just getting to the railway tracks. He saw me, dirty and bloody and crying hysterically, and I screamed at him to run. Without question, we ran all the way home. The hooded man was nowhere to be seen once we left the railway tracks. I last saw him standing in the woods, defeated that he couldn't catch me or something. I don't know. I told Michael everything and we never went back to the woods ever again. Years later in 2016, they bulldozed the woods and built a neighborhood there. We later found out from my fellow neighborhood friends who were in the area the same thing happened to them growing up. To this day, this is probably one of my scariest stories growing up. I'm 24, female, and I decided to spend my day fly fishing on the river with some of my friends. What started out as a pretty common day of fishing ended up being a very uncomfortable one. My friends and I hit the river a little bit before noon. We have a specific spot that we usually go to that isn't frequented very often, but due to the weekend, they did have more people than normal. Not as much in comparison to other areas, but still more than usual here. There were 4 of us in total, but we scattered around the riverbank. For the most part, I had eyes on everyone though. Right next to where I had my stuff set up, a gentleman decided to lay his stuff down and even set up a folding chair near mine. I was fishing, so I didn't really care, but after I caught one, I went to put it in ice, and that's when this guy initiated conversation. He introduced himself and I gave him my name, but didn't offer much more. He started making small talk, which I'm not a fan of. I never know what to say. I grabbed a beer from one of our ice chests, and he asked if he could bum one. I feel that was a bit of a rude question, but I gave him one as a good gesture because it was a holiday weekend. We always usually end up making friends with somebody, and offering a beer or two is usually one of our customs as a group, so this wasn't extremely off. But people generally wait until we offer. That's the point I'm getting at. I got back in the river and cast my line out. He stood about 5 feet away from me and kept talking. I listened to him. Not that I had much choice, but gradually I started moving away from him. He kept following me, which is a big no-go for me. He started making some very inappropriate comments and asked me some very inappropriate questions. Some are as follows. Do you have a boyfriend? I'll probably be a lesbian after this, I'm thinking. Are you wearing a push-up bra? I'm wearing waders, so how the hell can you possibly get that inaccurate information, I thought. When was the last time, you did the dirty? Probably more recently than you did, I'm thinking. What's the biggest you've ever had? In this river, about a 10-pound largemouth. Duh, I know what you mean, and I'm not biting. You want to go and have some fun? I was having plenty of fun before you showed up. All of these things I'm thinking in my head, and some of them I'm saying. I got tired of the questions and him not taking the hint, so I moved downstream where one of my guy friends was. I told him this dude was bugging me, I needed to find a new spot. My friend started waddling out of the river to go and talk to him, but he had moved away by that time. With the guy gone, we were able to continue fishing in peace. After a couple of more hours on the river, we collected our belongings and headed back to the parking lot of the fly shop we parked at. Moving all of our gear back and forth took about an hour by itself, and in that time I noticed that the creep was still around. I told my friend about him again, but I stopped him and my other friend from going over to him. Didn't seem worth the trouble. Plus the guy stood at about 6'4" to 6'5" based on my observations, and I just didn't want anybody getting hurt on my behalf. After about another hour, we all parted ways for the time being, but we were going to meet up later to cook our catch. I went into the fly shop to grab a Coke, which left me as the only remaining one from my group. This is where the story gets scarier. I was at my truck and had removed my waders and threw them in the back. Then I grabbed a t-shirt from my bag to change into. Lo and behold, look who walks up. Here my dumbass is alone in a parking lot and not close enough to the shop to go for help, and this creep says, "Wow, fire titties," and then refers to my shorts as coochie cutters. He was getting dangerously close to me, so I told him to get away. When he continued, I officially felt threatened. Thankfully, your girl packs heat, and I grabbed my pistol from my truck door and gave it to him. 45 reasons that he would be making a mistake. He immediately turned around and said that he was joking, then proceeded to speed walk towards the tree line. So yeah, there I was, boots, shorts, and a sports bra, pointing a 45 at the ground and threatening a creep. Wouldn't my dad be proud of me? I drove away feeling surprisingly normal, but pulled over at one point and started crying. I hate crying. It's such a girl thing. I'm only kidding, I guess, but I pulled into a gas station on my way home when I saw a wildlife and fisheries agent, where I explained the encounter and filed a report. He told me that he would contact the sheriff's office, who did reach back out to me this morning, where I filed a separate report. Unfortunately, I know how police reports go, and I know this guy won't be investigated, but I think I dodged a bullet, and so did he. From now on, I'll be sure to keep company with me until I'm ready to leave. Ever since I was a kid, I remember my grandma denouncing horror of any kind. Halloween masks, haunted houses, and scary movies. I had attributed this aversion to her background in faith. She is Hispanic and a devout Catholic. She believes anything horror-related is wrong, evil, you name it. So imagine my shock and curiosity when my grandparents shared a bombshell. Back in 1974, my grandpa convinced my grandma to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This would be her first and last scary movie. The weekends after the movie, my grandpa, grandma, my then toddler-aged mother, and my aunts and uncles decide that they will go horseback riding for the first time. Since everybody lived in Wisconsin, my family made the journey to a farm about 2 hours away. For the most part, everybody is in high spirits. Who can say no to a family adventure on a crisp autumn Wisconsin day? Despite the others' excitement, my grandma is worried. Since she doesn't care for horses, she chooses to stay behind on her own with my mother. When my family arrives at the farm, it is 3 o'clock. According to my grandma, she watched everybody get saddled up and then slowly ride off into the tangle of trees. The guide leading my family called out that the ride would last less than 2 hours, mentioning different trails, the need for breaks, and things of that nature. My grandma figures everybody will be back by around 5 o'clock. She waits with my mother in the car, playing games, reading storybooks, and trying to silence her bubbling anxiety. Needless to say, 5 o'clock comes and goes. No sign of my family. By this time, my mom has fallen asleep, which leaves my grandma with no way to distract herself from her worries. Finally, when 6 o'clock rolls around, she calls to a farmland from her car window. No way is she leaving the safety of her vehicle. She demands to know why her family hasn't returned yet when 5 o'clock has long since passed. By now, darkness has begun bleeding into the Wisconsin sky. The farmland assures her that everything is okay and that extra paths are taken throughout the ride. He tells her that her family should return soon. Now keep in mind, this was well before cell phones were a thing. Also a week before, she had seen her first scary movie and it scared the heck out of her. At this point, my poor grandma feels like she's living out a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She tries to contain her worry and begins a hushed, fearful prayer, until the flash of lightning that is soon followed by ear-splitting thunder. The noise wakes my mom, who starts to cry. My grandma must now not only ponder the frightening question of where her family went, but she also has a stressed, howling 2-year-old to deal with. It is now reaching 7 o'clock. The storm is growing more ferocious by the second. My grandma has to pee and her bladder feels like it's going to explode, but between the roar of the storm and the images of crazed country maniacs plaguing her mind, she refuses to leave the vehicle. She plans in her head that if they aren't back by 7:30, she is going to leave and find the nearest gas station to phone for help. Again, no cell phones during these days. 7:30 comes and her family hasn't come out from the woods. As she is scrambling around the car for her keys, she realizes my grandpa never gave them to her. The pound of a fist against her window shakes her from a whirlwind of panic. That panic amplifies by a million when she notices a sizable, brawny man peering in at her. He is wearing a jacket and the hood covers his head. My grandma says that by now, it felt like somebody had pushed a button and sent the world into slow motion. Everything crawled by a snail's pace. "Why don't you and the little one come inside?" the man yells. His words are authoritative and carry no hint of warmth. He isn't speaking from a place of concern at all. He's ordering my grandma into the farmhouse. All my grandma can do is shout, "Where is my family?" The man responds gruffly, "We're looking for them." My grandma orders him to call the police. The next words the man said made my grandma literally piss her pants. "We don't need the police." As he turns to go back into his house, he says, "You and the baby can come inside whenever you are ready." My grandma starts sobbing, fully convinced that her family has been brutally murdered and that she and her baby will be next. In the chaos of this moment, she hears somebody calling her name, but because of the pitch-black darkness and her profound fear, she knows she must be hearing things. Then she hears her name again, this time even louder. "Dora, help me." It's my grandpa's voice. When she realizes this, she puts my mom in the back seat, grabs the wooden baseball bat my grandpa keeps under his seat, locks the doors, and then exits the car. "Keep calling my name. Can't see you," she cries. After what feels like an eternity, she follows my grandpa's voice to his location. When she gets to him, she realizes my grandpa needed help because he is guiding my aunt across the high rain-soaked grass. She had hurt her ankle. They are both drenched in mud and rain and covered in scratches. The rest of my family is nowhere in sight. Before my grandma can assume the worst, she hears my uncle calling for my grandpa. One by one, everybody shuffles out of the wild woods and through the tall grass. Everyone is soaked in mud and injured in some capacity. Cuts, gashes, limping, and unsteadiness. All are shaken up as well. When they finally make it back to their vehicles, the sounds of running engines and the flood of headlights get the attention of the man inside the farmhouse. The farm door swings open and the brawny man comes to stand on the porch, with an amused chuckle. He drawls, "Oh, you all made it out of there?" My grandpa shouts, "That dumb jerk left us out there and never came back." All the man says in response is, "I'll have to talk to him about that. You can all come inside." His freakishly flippant and joking attitude sinks into his words. He knows damn well they aren't going into his house. My grandma begs my grandpa to leave it and get them out of there. With that, my family tears out of there as fast as humanly possible. Once my family was back and home safe, my grandpa explained what had happened. During the ride, the guide led them deep into the woods to a creek where the horses stopped for a drink. As the horses rested, the guide told my family that he had to go do something and would be back in 20 minutes. My family thought this was strange, and my grandpa even anxiously joked, "You're coming back, right?" The guide simply gave a low chuckle and took off on his horse. 20 minutes came and went, and when the guide didn't return, my family continued to wait, as they had no idea where to go. They could see the sky blackening above them. They would have to make it out on their own. As my family rode off, they tried to remember the path back to the farm. They wandered aimlessly. Eventually, rain started to fall. Pulsing lightning and the crash of thunder spooked the horses. Everybody but my grandpa got thrown off their horses. When my grandpa climbed off his horse to help the others, his own horse galloped away as well. From there, it was a nightmare trying to navigate the woods while wounded and roaming through a thick void of darkness. The only advice I can give you is this: if you are going horseback riding, you better make sure it doesn't become a horseback ride from hell. I'm currently 27, female at the time of writing this, but the encounter I'm going to describe took place when I was 21. When I was 21, I moved to a new city for school. I didn't know anybody, and I was suffering your typical first time away from home loneliness. A lot of this had to do with being separated from my best friend for the first time, and I was desperate for some companionship. I took to dating apps to try and build some sort of bridge. I had a couple of dates which ultimately didn't work out, but I guess that isn't so important. I matched with this one guy. He seemed like the whole package. He was cute, and he was into music and art, and had a mutual love for Stephen King. We talked for a week, and eventually we exchanged numbers and continued talking in more depth. I was young and naive at the time, and to catch feelings for this guy, I honestly thought I was falling for him. We talked in depth for about another week. He got to know me very well, and it was very scary to me how much we had in common. We made a date to meet at the bar. He told me he was running a little bit late, and to go have a drink at the bar myself, and he would meet me there. It was sort of late afternoon, so the area was fairly empty. They had 2 other girls that showed up at the bar during my time there. One of the girls had broken her silence by saying that she was there for a first date with a really cute guy and she was nervous, and asked if I or the other girl had any advice for her. Oh, how crazy. I was there for a first date too that I was extremely excited about. The other girl was also there for a first date with a guy. We shared our thoughts and really hyped each other up. It was a total sister bonding moment. That was until we all drew the conclusion that we were all there to meet the same guy. Same pictures, different names, different personalities. This guy played us in a big way. Believe it or not, this was actually a huge letdown that turned into something good. The 3 of us ended up hitting it off naturally, and we actually stayed at the bar and talked. Since then, the 3 of us have become really close, and both are serving in my upcoming wedding. We just clicked over the mutual embarrassment. One of them actually lives with me now, and we truly became best friends. But on the subject now of my wedding. Over the weekend, I had my bachelorette party trip. My fiancé had his bachelor party trip over the weekend as well. He and his friends were staying at a fishing camp, while I and my friends were at an Airbnb not very far away. It wasn't a huge trip or anything like that. We just wanted to have a good time. Well, we were really enjoying ourselves. I had to go shopping one day at a nearby store where my longtime best friend and 2 other best friends joined me. Not to give TMI, but I had to buy a new bra, and that'll probably be relevant in a bit. That night we're playing Cards Against Humanity and having some drinks. It got to the portion of the evening where my mom wanted to go around the room so everybody could tell how they met me in a cringe story or anything they wanted to share. Wasn't looking forward to that, but it is customary, and did it lead to something? One of my best friends, one that I met in the bar, came forward for her turn and laid out the truth on the table. So apparently, that day, where the 3 of us showed up for a date with the same guy, was completely and meticulously orchestrated. She was having trouble making friends of her own, and she noticed me and the other girl at school. She made a fake dating profile after apparently hearing the 2 of us mentioning it at some point, and essentially stalked the app until she found us. This is how she got to know us, which is why we were able to hit it off so easily. She orchestrated the whole thing in order to make friends. Her cadence and her delivery of the story were so strange, so creepy. First of all, it was a big revelation, and it's a strong relationship built on deceit. I honestly felt very violated and uneasy. My mom cut through the tension by changing the subject. Later, I was out playing my guitar with my best friend and my other best friend. I'm sorry, I could have given them alternate names, came outside. We discussed it and also mutually agreed that it was really weird, and she picked a hell of a time to drop this as a bomb. So many things that once seemed so innocent started taking on a more creepy undertone. Just the day before, this girl was in the same fitting room as me, with my tits out while I was trying on bras. She has pictures of the three of us together on the mirror in her bedroom. I personally got out of that kind of thing in high school, but given the recent revelation, it just adds some ick to the mix for me. We've shared very intimate details about some of our lives, and I'm now wondering what's true and what's not. I called my fiancé that night and asked if I could see him. Not for the reason of what I described. I just missed him. He was thrown off by the story, didn't know how to feel about it, and also said he wouldn't have known what he would have done if one of his buddies did that to him. I feel betrayed. Maybe I'm overreacting, but if I am, I'm not the only one. I guess nobody got hurt, but it was a creepy way of taking advantage of two people who were vulnerable. I'm male 42, live just outside of Portland, Oregon, and I love going out on my own to have a beer and play pinball. I have an app on my phone that displays the locations of any pinball machines around me, and I used to wander around the city a lot before the pandemic, crawling between bars playing pinball. I'm married, but loud bars and pinball machines are not comfortable for my wife, and I've always enjoyed going out in Portland on my own and seeing where the night takes me. The Oregon mask mandate ended last week, and I only had a half day of work today, so I took the train into Portland with a hankering to play some Sopranos pinball. It has always been one of my favorite machines, partially because it is clever and full of innuendo, but also because I'm usually okay at it, meaning I can get enough free plays to pass a couple of hours on only a few dollars. So I arrive at the first bar where I normally play Sopranos, and I buy a beer and hit the head before feeding a couple dollars into the machine and getting started. It's immediately obvious that the machine is in need of maintenance, to the point that using my remaining credits was just a waste of time. I hadn't been out in a long time, and I was determined to have a good time, so I pounded my beer and opened my pinball app to see if I could find another good machine nearby. I was surprised to see another bar within walking distance that also had Sopranos. I had never been to this particular spot, so I headed out immediately and double timed it. What should have been an 8 to 10 minute walk took over 20 due to a large area that was closed due to road construction, which forced me to go pretty far out of my way. The sun was setting, and there was a huge group of blackbirds or sparrows that were flying around overhead. There were so many I actually jogged a bit to avoid the bird poop that I could hear splattering on the road nearby. The second bar was totally worth the walk, and it was a really fun spot I plan on going back to. The Sopranos machine there works great, and there was a guy feeding money into the jukebox and doing a great job creating everyone's playlist. I order a second beer and ask the bartender where the bathroom is, only to find out that it is closed due to a plumbing emergency. I already had to go really bad, so I thanked the bartender, pay my tab, and checked the pinball app again to see what else I can find nearby. I was doubly surprised to see that another nearby bar that I thought had permanently closed was back in business, and they also had a Sopranos machine too. Thankfully, this bar was a lot closer to the second bar than the second was to the first, and I made really good time getting there. The third bar is packed and has a great energy. I use the bathroom and head back to the bar to get a beer before walking through the crowd to the isolated small arcade in a room adjacent to the bar. I was ecstatic to find myself in a completely empty room containing a nearly mint condition Sopranos machine. I'm a couple drinks into my first game when a younger guy in his 20s or early 30s walks in and asks if I want to play doubles in the next game. I excitedly agree because I hadn't had the chance to play against somebody in a while. I honestly don't remember his name, but I introduced myself, and he started talking to me about how he was from New York and felt like everybody spends too much time on their cell phones. The world is going to hell rant, you know the one. He seemed depressed and in need of some direction or guidance, which I wasn't going to judge him about, as I was pretty much the same when I was his age. I tried to engage him and brought up some examples from history where technology shook things up, but ultimately improved things on a global scale after some time. I asked him what brought him to Portland from New York, and that's when the conversation took a turn. He became really evasive and made some comments about Portland being just as bad as New York. My hackles went up a bit, and I grabbed a drink of my beer and started playing again to distract from the odd energy he was giving off to me. That's when he really freaked me out by letting me know that he had been following me for the first bar that I went to that night. At first, I didn't even really think about what he was saying until he talked about how crazy it was when those birds were flying over our heads, even though he was pursuing me without my knowledge at the time. He also described getting into an altercation with the bartenders at the second bar, which was just crazy because both bartenders had been really polite and apologetic about the bathrooms being out of order. The pinball machine in that bar gave me a view of the bar itself, so I would have seen any such altercation if it happened while I was there, so what he was describing must have happened after I left. He is still talking as I'm playing at this point, going on like we are already really close friends, even though at this point I'm just making sure I have all of my stuff on me so that I can leave as soon as my ball drains. Grab my jacket the moment the ball drops, give the guy a quick firm pat on the shoulder, and walk back to the bar and crowd as quickly as possible, before triple timing it back to the train station, taking as many turns as I could along the way. I made it to the train without incident, but the encounter has sat oddly with me since, so Mr. Everyone used their cell phone too much from New York, let's never meet again, and also stay away from my Sopranos pinball. Last Sunday, I was at my boyfriend's apartment for the weekend. He left to go to work at about 8 a.m. and gave me a hug. This woke me up, but by the time I could open my eyes, he was already out the door. He forgot to lock the apartment door on his way out, which I had not realized. I got up, put my contacts in, brushed my teeth, and put my workout clothes on, starting my day off right with some squats and crunches. Then I make some coffee and toast. Hop on the computer to look up hotels and restaurants my boyfriend and I could go to on our little in-state vacation. The entry door leads directly to the open kitchen and living room area, which is where his PC is. I hear the door handle turning and get excited, thinking my boyfriend is coming home for an early lunch at 10 a.m. The door quickly opens and an older man, 60s or 70s, steps in. My first thought is maybe he's the electrician that the landlord said would be stopping by soon, but how odd he didn't even knock, or... oh wait, he's not wearing pants. Luckily, he was wearing underwear. This guy speed walked into the apartment with such a glossed over look. I was mostly polite in the beginning, saying, "Sir, who are you? What are you doing here? This isn't your apartment." I progressively began shouting and cussing him out though, but nothing would faze him. He went straight to the dining table and over to a large cardboard box my boyfriend had full of board games. He sat on them. Literally sat on the games, yes. It looked like he was going to take a dump on them. Then he tried lying down on the games. I got up and ran to the bathroom, scared for my safety as I'm only like 5'2" and not as strong as I'd like to think. This guy was probably 6 foot and who knows how many drugs he was on. I dialed 911 and informed the operator everything that happened as I was shaking. She asked if I was able to safely leave the bathroom to let the police in. I said, "Oh, no need because it's unlocked and that's how the guy got in," and gave a little laugh. She laughed too. I heard the cops at the door, but they were talking to each other. I opened the bathroom door and peeked in the living room. No guy. I was nervous about checking the bedroom because I'd have to go around the corner and wouldn't be able to see very well. Suddenly I hear, "Sir, where are your pants?" from the hallway. I'm standing right at the door to listen and texting my boyfriend everything that's just happened. They had the guy in cuffs and the druggie kept shouting that they were hurting his hands. The officers asked him where he lives and what he's doing here. The guy said where he lives like 7 streets away and he's trying to go to bed. My boyfriend came home shortly after and comforted me. We went downstairs to see if the police needed my statement before they took off with the guy. They said, "No, we already got it from 3 other people, and we found out that he went into every unlocked apartment he could." An officer walked by with a gallon Ziploc bag full of pill bottles. He found his pants and shoes in the hallway. So, lock your door, folks. A little backstory. In my late teens, I think 18 to 19, I was no longer getting along with my parents and decided to move out. I wasn't able to get very many hours at my job due to being a full-time college student, which meant at my already minimum wage job for the very few hours I got didn't give me much money at all. Due to limited funding, my now ex-boyfriend's mother invited me to live with them. Now on to the story. My now ex and his mom were very strange people. I later found out it was because he and she were on very large amounts of drugs. Let's just call her L and call him B, to avoid issues. Anyways, L and B had a lot of very strange friends that sometimes would come and stay at our house for weeks. I was always taught to be polite to guests growing up, even if they weren't your guest or even if they were overstaying their welcome, which is probably why things in this situation happened the way they did. Elle had decided, since it was Saturday, that she was going to do some grocery shopping, and B had gone with her. I was asked to come along but wanted some space, so I opted to stay home and be alone. I was unaware we had a guest at this time and was slightly shocked when I came out of mine and B's bedroom to find a woman around my age chilling on the couch. Out of politeness, I greeted her and made small talk while pouring myself a bowl of cereal. We quickly became friends due to similar interests and similar tastes in music and movies. Everybody else hated scary movies except for her, so for the next 2 weeks, she was staying with us and I had somebody to watch them with and secretly drink beer with late at night while chatting about bands such as Poison, Motley Crue, and Aerosmith. It was pretty cool. One night we were playing a sort of game similar to Truth or Dare and she dared me to tell her the worst thing I'd ever done, which to this day is still shoplifting a lip gloss from the store when I was 13 and getting caught. Then I ratted out my friends who were also stealing so I wouldn't be the only one in trouble. I then asked her the same question. Her response was, "Well, I stabbed my mom and dad in their throat. I know I shouldn't have, but I just hated them." At first I was shocked and stunned into silence. Then I started laughing because that had to be a joke, right? She said yes, it was a joke, and then she and I both cracked up laughing at her weird sense of humor. When I got up the next morning, I went to have coffee and our guest was gone. I was a little bit bummed out, but figured she would come visit again. Most guests came and stayed multiple times a year. About 3 years went by. I had dumped B not long after this happened and moved back in with my family. I searched for this girl on Facebook off and on throughout those few years and was never able to find her. Then one day my stepdad showed me a news story on the Google homepage. It was about a couple who had been stabbed to death in their homes and about their daughter, the one who did it, finally being caught. When I saw the picture of the girl, I recognized her instantly. It was my friend. I never found her on Facebook because she gave me a fake name and a fake phone number. Okay, so I, 21 female, and my roommate and best friend, also 21 female, live in a rental house. I won't say our exact location, but it is in Texas, US. She and I are both practicing Wiccans. We do rituals and meditations and have weekly coven meetings. I can't stress enough how much Wicca is not a bad religion. Witchery is not really how it's depicted in fiction. We don't pray to the devil, we don't sacrifice animals, and we don't harm anyone. Being a pagan in Texas is hard enough. Thankfully, in our area, it's not really a big deal as we are close to a college town, but as it is everywhere else, we do have our bad people. So we live close to an older couple. We're not like right next door or anything, but like close enough to see them, if they're outside. I was doing some meditation in my second story bedroom, so it's about 110 degrees right here now. So I was in a state of half dress just to combat the heat. Later on in the day, the man that lives next door stopped me at my car and said that he saw me naked and praying to the devil. And that this was a nice community and we weren't welcome if we were going to practice that evil shit, I quote. I told him to get the heck out of my driveway as I was getting in the car. And he said something along the lines of, "Keep playing near the dog's bowl. Don't be surprised when the dog bites you." I just flipped him off and left. I'm not a mean person, but I have low tolerance for ignorance. Our roommate, who was a lot more introverted than I am, was confronted by the same guy's son who was a few years older than us, and he said that his mom was feeling scared because their cat had recently died and that she assumed that we were behind it. As two girls that have a cat ourselves, we were upset that anybody would think we were behind it. He also made mention that his dad had pointed out that he had seen me meditating in my room, but she had very wisely pointed out that he was the one looking through the window and that he wouldn't have actually been able to see anything unless he was making an honest and determined attempt to do so. This apparently angered him and he left. So we both wake up early this morning to run some errands before the heat got too bad. When we left, we found that all of our plants had been ripped out of the ground and thrown around the yard. Our squirrel feeder and bat house were also destroyed. Also, our cat's outside bed had been cut up with, I'm assuming, a knife. The biggest thing that bothered me was that a ceramic triple moon insignia that we have hung up on the side of our house was thrown into the yard and broken. Not only did we feel that our faith was attacked, but also our personal space. We called the police and filed a report. We told them everything that had happened with the neighbors, and they said without more evidence there was nothing they could do. This literally hit home for me. This isn't frickin' Salem. We're not here to hurt anyone. Anyways, just wanted to share what we were dealing with. I'll update if anything new comes up. This happened a few years ago when I was 20. I lived in a mid-sized college town with a pretty low crime rate. The apartment complex I lived in primarily housed students. Given that it was early August before fall classes officially began, the complex was empty. To make matters even worse, it was the brief period of time between August 1st, when leases ended, and August 15th, move-in day. So the only people at the apartment complex would be people that not only stayed in town for the summer, but also had renewed, or at least extended their leases. That being said, the complex was empty. Seriously, I swear there were maybe a handful of people living in this complex, which probably housed about 250 to 300 people during the school year, on that given night. That night, I was just chilling in the living room playing video games and doing whatever. All of my roommates had moved out a few days prior, so I was completely alone. Around 11:30 p.m., I was in the kitchen cleaning when I went to throw something away and noticed that the garbage can was almost overflowing. I took the bag out, immediately noticing that whatever fruit I had thrown away the other day was definitely starting to rot. And I went to open the front door when I suddenly was overcome with this feeling of dread, I suppose. I don't know quite how to explain it, but I just remember a feeling of coldness washing over me and my stomach sinking. My intuition was telling me that I shouldn't go outside. Of course, being the idiot that I am, I decided to ignore that intuition, primarily because the trash bag stank really bad, and I didn't want to have it smell first thing in the morning tomorrow. Plus, the dumpster was right outside my building. It would take me 1 minute tops to take the trash out. So I gathered up the bag and headed outside. Since it was such a short walk, I decided to not put on any shoes. So here I am walking barefoot down the steps and into the parking lot, carrying a trash bag and a box of recycling, wearing shorts and a tank top, when I noticed something off. The parking lot, which would have 25 to 30 cars in it normally, was empty except for my car and 2 other cars. The odd thing was that one of the other cars was on idling, with the headlights turned off. It was a white truck kind of beat up and old with a ladder on top and some boxes. Hard to tell. That parking lot had a grand total of 1 street lamp in the back. I thought it was odd because it definitely looked like a work truck given the ladder. There was no reason for that truck to be parked here at night, especially not with people in it. I was about halfway to the dumpster when I finally got close enough to see who was sitting inside the truck. From what I could tell, there was at least 2 men late 20s to early 30s sitting in the truck. The guy in the driver's seat closest to me didn't notice me initially, until the guy next to him pointed in my direction. As soon as that man turned towards me, my blood ran cold and I briefly paused. My gut was telling me to run back up into the apartment. Of course I didn't do that. I reasoned that perhaps they were waiting for someone, or maybe a drug deal. I thought it would look worse if I suddenly bolted instead of just throwing my trash away. So I continued walking towards the dumpster, trying to make it look like I didn't care about them and was just actually taking out the trash. All the while, the 2 guys in the car continued to talk to each other, pointing and gesturing towards me. Couldn't make out what they were saying, but the window was rolled down so I could hear them talking. When I finally reached the dumpster, the 2 guys had gone silent. They were now just staring, leering more like. I slowly lifted the trash bag above the dumpster. As soon as I let go, the truck immediately reverses. That's when I say screw it, drop the box of recycling and take off running. I hear the tires of the truck literally squeal behind me as I'm sprinting across the parking lot. I hardly even notice the sharp pieces of rock and other debris that are stabbing into the soles of my feet as I run. I made the quick decision to run up a different staircase than the one I had come down in an effort to throw them off. I get back into my apartment, slam the door, and then lock and deadbolt it. I ran to the sliding glass door that leads out onto the balcony, made sure that it was locked, a little bit paranoid at this point, but hey, and then closed the blinds. I took a second to catch my breath before I realized that the blinds of my bedroom window are most likely open and my lights are on. I jogged to my bedroom, turned off my lamp, and then approached the window. That's when I noticed the truck, still no headlights, creeping through the parking lot. This one is on the opposite side of the first parking lot. The apartment building was situated in between them. It stops right underneath my window. I hit the ground as quickly as possible, hoping that they didn't see me. It's silent for a few moments before I hear someone shout something that sounds suspiciously like, "Damn it." I didn't dare look out the window again. I just sat there curled into a ball on the floor of my bedroom. After a few minutes, the sound of the truck's engine faded. I peeked out the window and was thankfully met with the sight of an empty parking lot. I didn't sleep that night. I had a few other encounters during the 2 years I lived at this apartment, but this one by far remains the scariest. The one good thing I took from this experience is to trust my intuition, even if I can come up with reasons against it. I have no idea what these guys were doing in the parking lot that night, nor do I have any idea why they chased after me. There is one person I've met in my life that I'm absolutely positive was a psychopath, and it was a 10-year-old little girl. The summer after I graduated college, I was living in a house in Berkeley with a few PhD students. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it wasn't the worst either, I guess. There were a few families living in the neighborhood, including the people in the house next to us. It seemed like a reasonably nice 2-story house, but on several occasions, there were police cars and/or ambulances outside the house. We never really questioned why, as police cars weren't a rare sight in the area, and we had only ever seen a young girl and her mom at the house, so there was nothing overtly abnormal or concerning. One afternoon, my roommates and I had just finished smoking a joint in our backyard when we heard a knock at the door. I open it and it's the mother from next door. I was a bit taken aback, and even more so when she said, "Hi, I wanted to ask you guys something. I really don't want to have to call the police." At this point, I'm thinking she must have seen or smelled us smoking weed, and while it was Berkeley, it technically hadn't been legalized yet, so I'm thinking we need to go apologize and talk our way out of trouble. But then I noticed this woman is visibly shaking. She was very clearly terrified and said, "I just don't know what to do. I'm having a situation with my daughter, and I really just need another adult to be there." My roommate Sean and I immediately agreed to go with her, while my other roommates look on, incredibly confused by whatever the heck is going on. The mother is asking some stoned students to be adults, so she must be truly desperate for help. Sean and I walk over there with her, and she explains that her daughter has some issues, which are currently manifesting as her standing on the roof of their house, threatening to drop her mom's work computer off the edge. Wow, shit just got real super fast. Sure enough, we walk up the driveway to the house, and there's this kid standing on the roof of their 2-story house, dangling a MacBook Pro over the side. She's saying in this disturbing, singy-songy voice, "Look, Mom, no hands." Sean and I immediately make eye contact, and we are both creeped out. This is not a normal kid. The way she is speaking reminds me of the twins from The Shining. She is not crying and doesn't seem remotely distressed. On the contrary, it appears that she is enjoying this torment on her mother, like it's some kind of sick game. The mom starts explaining to us that her daughter has had issues like this for many years. She has a psychiatrist and a therapist, and the mother has called both. They recommended calling the police, but the mom has been through this quite a few times before and doesn't want the child to go through the ordeal of being restrained and taken to the hospital again. She is frightened and exhausted and doesn't know what to do, so I just start talking to the kid. I tell her about how I used to love climbing on the roof of my house, and now I'm into rock climbing, and I bet she would love that too. Besides, it's much safer than climbing around the edge of a roof if you make sure to use the proper gear and safety precautions. And the fact that she's so unsafe right now is really scaring her mom. I told her if she calms down, I'm happy to talk to her more about climbing, as well as show her the pet geckos we have that literally climb up the walls. I'm just pulling things out of my ass at this point. I have no idea what to say or how to mediate a situation like this. But I'm just trying to diffuse the tension and get her to calm down. She's flat out ignoring me at first, continuing to taunt her mom, but eventually she seems to get bored or irritated with my attempts to engage her, turns around and climbs back towards the window where she got onto the roof. She runs down the stairs out to meet us, then says in some weirdly singy-songy fake, "Come play with us, Danny" voice, "I dropped your computer on the roof and now it's broken." "I'm sorry, Mom. Do you forgive me?" There was zero remorse whatsoever in her voice. It sounded so disturbing and manipulative. I was blown away that it was coming from a 10-year-old girl and not some demon child from a horror movie. The mom is still shaking and just looks overwhelmed, so I offer to go up and get her computer from the roof. She agrees and escorts me through the house up the stairs with her daughter trailing behind. It appears to be a perfectly normal, well-maintained middle-class home. The girl is clearly irritated with me spoiling her game and repeatedly orders me to leave. I ignore her, climb out the window onto the roof, and see the laptop is sitting by a gutter seemingly unscathed. I climb back through and hand it to the mom. At this point, the girl realized her bluff was called and skipped off to her room. Mom proceeds to explain to me that this whole thing was triggered by her changing the password to her laptop after the girl logged into it, stole her mom's credit card, and ordered over $2,000 worth of stuff. This girl is freaking 10 years old. She's been pulling stuff like this her entire life, I guess, and nobody understands why. They had to move the girl's younger sibling into a separate apartment with her father because they were afraid that she would hurt him. The mom was crying at this point, saying they really tried their best to get her the help she needs, and they're just at their wits' end, and I did my best to reassure her. Gave her my phone number and told her to contact me if she needs help in the future. Sean and I noped the heck out of there after that and went back to our house. She never contacted me, and we moved out a few months later. This happened a few months ago. I, 23 male, was driving home from a trip to the store while talking to my friend on the phone around 9 or 10 p.m. I pull into my driveway, park, and talk to my friend for a few minutes while I'm sitting there in my car. All of a sudden, this sketchy car pulls up directly behind me. There's no way I could back out without hitting the passenger side of it. It's dark. My driveway lights are kind of dim, and they deliberately turned off the lights of their car when they pulled up behind me. But I faintly spotted 3 guys sitting in it. I'm feeling pretty creeped out, so I asked my friend what I should do, and we both decided I should wait it out a bit and see if they leave. A few more minutes go by and they're still there. Eventually, we figured that the best plan of action would be to stay on the phone, calmly grab my bags from the trunk without breaking eye contact with the people in the car, and walk to the door, which is only about 15 feet away. In hindsight, it probably would have been a better idea to just call my parents and ask them to open the door for me from the inside. I stepped outside, then grabbed my stuff from the trunk. The guy in the rear passenger seat of their car cracks the door open, and the guy in the front passenger seat is staring me down still. They are definitely assessing if I'm a viable target, I'm thinking. I kept eye contact with them, but I felt like a deer in the headlights. It felt like ages, but it must have been 2 to 3 seconds at most. Suddenly, the guy in the rear shouts something to his buddies along the lines of, "Oh, it's a guy." Shuts the door, and then they speed away at like 80 miles per hour on a residential street. I was relieved, but mostly confused. I updated my friend and let them know I'm alright, then I walked inside. I'm male, 5'9", and slightly overweight with a bit of a baby face, so I don't exactly come across as intimidating to most people I meet. So, I doubt I scared them off because of my appearance alone. I'm terrified to think of what could have happened to me if I were a female. It's legitimately messed up. Why am I safe from these things while my sister and my female friends have no choice but to keep guns in their cars, get tiny cans of pepper spray for their keychains, and avoid being alone in general? It's a scary place out there. Whether you're male or female or anything else, always be vigilant. I used to think my neighborhood was relatively safe, but now I'm afraid of sitting in my driveway at night. When I was 15, my best friend at the time invited me along to check out our youth club. It wasn't like a church youth group or anything, although it did kind of have a religious message to it, but mostly it was a group of teens from all walks of life. Mostly kids from rough backgrounds, being able to get together and have some fun for a few hours one night a week, interacting with other kids and just forgetting about life for a bit. My best friend really enjoyed it, and each Friday morning at school I would be subjected to her praises of the group the night before and all the cool things they did. So one Thursday after school, I went along with her, and she was right. It was fun. There were 3 leaders, and they were all people in their 20s and early 30s. We played games and did a lot of group activities, but there was also a place to do schoolwork or get extra help if needed. I went along with her the next week as well, and I remember being really flattered and feeling really special when one of the leaders singled me out and praised me. He ended up giving me special attention most weeks when I did actually go. I didn't go every week, but I was pretty much a regular. There were a few times when I won a game of some sort, and he told me to hang around afterwards and wait for him, and he would get me a prize. I'd follow him into one of the back rooms, and he'd give me a chocolate bar as my prize. I realize now that anything could have happened in that back room at the center, because it was mostly a disused room, so nobody would have thought to look for me there. But it was also poorly lit. He could have done anything to me, but he didn't. I didn't have a male figure in my life, and my mom and I weren't the best of friends when I was a teenager, so I really looked up to this guy and just thought he was cool. He wasn't an authority figure like all the other adults, so I really felt special when he gave me attention. There was one time my friends and I were walking home from school and we were smoking. He drove past, and then when he saw it was us, he turned back around. We thought we were in so much trouble, but he said that it was better that he knew. He even told us that he smoked himself and then offered to ride us home. My friend lived not that far away, so she was home before me. For 10 minutes, it was just me and him, and again, now that I think about it, anything could have happened, but it didn't. He asked me about my favorite bands and music, movies, and TV shows. We had a fun time. When we pulled up near my house, He put his hand on my knee and squeezed it, telling me that he'd hoped to see me at that group that Thursday. I didn't think anything of it at all. It didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. There were gifts too. He gave me a USB once with about 100 movies downloaded onto it. Gave me a poster for my room of a band I liked. He even one day after the group ended, gave me some cigarettes from his pack. The light touches continued. He'd walk past me and pull my ponytail, or he'd playfully slap my arm. There were compliments about my hair or what I was wearing. Again, in my mind, there was nothing weird going on at all. I thought it was normal, and I felt special and flattered. One day, he found me on social media and sent me messages through Facebook. He started out nice and then got weird. I was 16 by this stage, and I was just starting to have proper crushes and notice boys. He asked if there were any boys I liked, or if I knew of any at my school that liked me. He asked if I'd ever been kissed, and I'll never forget that afternoon because I was cleaning my room, and my phone pinged with a message. It was from him. He asked me if I'd ever touched myself or had dirty thoughts. I was so embarrassed that I quickly put my phone back and didn't message him for 2 days after. He apologized profusely and told me not to tell anyone, but my mom happened to see over my shoulder and she asked who all the messages were from. I asked her a question about what he had asked me, thinking it was normal for boys to ask that question, not seeing anything wrong, despite the fact that I had been embarrassed by it, and she flipped. I didn't understand at all what was going on, and she demanded to see the phone and the messages. She wanted to know everything. There was no youth group after that, and I never saw him again. At the time, I didn't understand the situation or what was going on. Mom and I have never spoken about it properly, but I can only assume she notified somebody about it. A week later at school, I was taken out of class, and some people asked me some questions about the youth leader, and I told them all. I don't know what happened to him, and I don't know if he'd done it before or if he did it again. Sometimes I wonder if he was trying to groom me. It was definitely creepy, and I understand the scope of the situation now, that it's nearly 10 years on. So this event just happened to me about 30 minutes ago, and I'm still creeped out by it. I'm writing this story out on a different public bus as we speak, so I apologize if this story seems a little bit rushed. I live in a specific city in the northeast of Scotland, and as a result, I rely heavily on public buses to get to and from my local university. I have come across a few different weirdos in my short time here in the city, but this is certainly the most bizarre out of them all. I'm currently an art student, and today I was meant to be working on a specific project for this semester. I soon realized I forgot the camera I so desperately needed. I wasn't technically meant to be in class until the afternoon, so I made the decision to jump on the next bus I saw, heading back to my flat. Who knew this would end up being a mistake? The bus journey started off like any other. People got on, people got off. People are generally avoiding all conversations. Nothing unusual in the slightest. As for myself, I was absent-mindedly looking out the window as I usually do, just casually watching the world go by when the elderly lady in question decided to take the seat next to me. At first glance, she looked completely harmless. She was an elderly lady after all. I say she was maybe 70 years old, Middle Eastern in origin, sporting a thick white jacket and dark-tinted sunglasses. Completely harmless, if not a little bit weird. And you'll see why in a minute. At first, I assumed she wanted to engage in small talk with me, asking me about the bus's destination and the economy, now that Brexit is a thing. I don't particularly enjoy small talk, but I would never be rude towards anyone who wanted to exchange conversation with me. I like to think I am pretty respectful overall. She then started to ask me about me as the conversation shifted towards me. She asked all the standard questions like, are you from around here, or what are you up to today? Do you go to university? When's your stop? All of which I politely answered. I saw no harm in doing so. I have way too much respect for the elderly in that way. She then started quizzing me about my family, whether or not I have a grandmother, and of course, whether I have a boyfriend. Oh, how that last question annoys me. I identify as lesbian, and I do understand some people aren't comfortable with me outright saying I have a girlfriend, so I always referred to her as my partner. It's just much easier to say it that way, I believe. So then she asked me if my partner was a man or a woman, and it was then I told her the truth. If people tend to ask me that, then I'm sure it's safe to assume that it's okay to reveal the gender of my loved one. That's when it got really weird damn quickly. She then followed up on this inquiry with these questions, all of which made me feel really weird. Why did you choose to be with a woman? Why did you not like being with a man? Do you hate men? Have you ever been with a man? Is it better with a woman? What do you and your girlfriend do? Then she started getting very specific, saying things like, are you on top or bottom, or do you penetrate each other? Or is it just oral? At this point, I was beyond uncomfortable. You can't just ask a complete stranger about this, especially in such gross detail and on public transportation. This is way beyond weird. I politely told her that this conversation was inappropriate and I didn't feel okay talking about this with her, but she persisted. I said nothing until I got off the next available stop. She then got off at the same exact stop as me to begin following me through the busy streets of the city. Thankfully, I managed to lose her in the crowd by entering one of the many shopping malls, making sure to lose her. Once I was sure I lost her, I boarded the next bus and managed to get to my flat safely. This is certainly one of the most bizarre encounters I've ever experienced. If anybody can give me an explanation as to why she was asking me all these weird questions, then feel free to share, but I'm still very creeped out by this. I won't be boarding that bus again anytime soon, I can promise you that. When I, 25 female, was newly 16 in 2011, I went to China on a 10-day trip for high school students sponsored by our local Midwestern university. On one occasion, we were in a large market on the basement level of a shopping center in Beijing. I can't remember exactly where. We were supposed to be using the buddy system, and I was buddies with a boy that I have stayed friends with over the years. While looking around the large market, we got separated for a few minutes, visiting different stalls, but I just assumed my friend was close by and could see me. I walked into a shop stall by myself to look at some of those tacky souvenir canvas bags that you can find in any major city. I browsed for a couple of hours, not paying attention to the fact that I was the only one in the stall, when a small middle-aged Chinese woman came up to me and grabbed me tightly around the arm. In broken English, she told me that she had more purses and bags in her secret shop and started pulling me towards the back of the store. Taken aback, I said I didn't want to look. In front of me, a man was pushing open a door at the back of a wall that had bags hanging all over that would have appeared to be part of the display. I just remember being incredibly confused and hesitant. She was holding onto my arm so tight it hurt while pulling me forward, and I just remember in that moment looking around quickly. Then I see my 6'2" tall male friend running over. He came and grabbed my other arm, and when she saw him, she immediately let go, walked off, and the man shut the door. I don't know exactly what was going on, but I do know that I was very young and naive at the time, and that I am very fortunate I had a watchful friend. When I was 20, I spent a semester abroad in Copenhagen. I lived in a house in the suburb just north of the city, and I had spent the evening having some drinks with friends in the city center. I was the only friend who lived in that direction, so I got on the S train by myself. I did this every day to get to and from class to go home. A male friend offered to go with me, but I didn't want to inconvenience him with an extra trip, so I declined. The train ride was 20 to 30 minutes, and the second stop, a dark-haired middle-aged man, sat down across from me. Even though I had been drinking, I wasn't drunk, and by this point in my life, I had learned how to be just a little bit more careful of my surroundings. I busied myself with my phone, and he asked me how I was in Danish. Many people assumed I was because I am pale and blonde. My barely passable Danish was even worse if I had any alcohol, so I apologized and said that I only spoke English. In choppy English, he said he was Spanish and didn't speak much English himself. I just smiled and nodded, hoping he would understand that we couldn't talk. However, he kept trying to ask me questions though, and I decided to be polite and asked how he was doing in my incredibly poor Spanish. He took that as an invitation to ask more questions, and I could barely understand a thing. He was visibly frustrated I couldn't converse with him, and then tried to ask if I was with friends or if I was from here. Subtle red flags. I thought about getting off the train early, but I didn't want to get lost. I had only been there a few weeks at this point. 10 minutes later, I got to my stop and got off the train. I very much noticed he also got off the train just before the door closed. Usually I walked home. It was a 15-minute walk from the station to my house, and on normal days, it was a pleasant walk through a residential neighborhood. He followed me through the tunnel under the tracks to the other side, and luckily a city bus was outside the station. I immediately got on, showed the driver my pass, and sat right behind him. It was late at night, and I was the only one on the bus. This driver must have been perceptive and understood something was amiss because he looked at me and asked in English, not Danish, where my stop was. I told him, and he closed the door right after. As the bus pulled away, I saw the Spanish man standing outside the station, staring at me through the windows. He turned away and walked back through the tunnel under the station towards the platform. Both experiences were a combination of good timing and understanding people, but it is frustrating to think that I needed or should have had the help of a male friend in these scenarios. The world isn't always a friendly place. One night around 11 p.m., my mom and I were sitting in the room. My dad and sister were in bed, and my mom was asleep on the couch, and I was playing PUBG Mobile. At one point, I could hear noises coming from the hallway. Thinking it was the cats, I brushed it off. I started to hear more noise and thought, what the heck are they doing? Then I saw something roll on the floor by the dining room table and one of the cats walking up to it. Again, thinking it was the cats. The object, however, was placed on top of a vanity that we have in the hallway. They don't go on top of that, but we do have a 9 to 10 month old curious kid. I then heard a male voice. At first I thought it might be one of my teammates in the game talking. I quickly realized it was not. I then thought my dad got up, which is pretty common for him. So I asked my mom. Didn't realize she was falling asleep. If my dad had come down, it was him. She sleepily said yes, so I tried to brush it off again. Suddenly I see this thing, which I found out after was cleaning wipes for the interior of the cars that were placed on the vanity, flying at me, landing on the floor, on the stool in front of me. I don't remember, I thought. That can't be the cats. I got up and walked over to the hallway. I got to the step when I realized that my dad's walking stick and a straw hat that was on top of our coat hanger were on the floor. Neither cat has ever got on top of it. I walked up the step and heard movement in the office. It was dark. The office is right next to the front door, about 2 meters from the living room front door. I thought it might be my sister looking for something. And then this guy gets up, comes out of the room, goes to the front door, unlocks it and walks out. He was wearing a hoodie and I didn't see his face. I was paralyzed with fear and confusion. My mind immediately went, do I know him? After he left, I yelled out to my mom that somebody just walked out. She was obviously confused and concerned. We realized he came in from the back door, which was unlocked. He either climbed the gate, which is about 2 meters high, I think, walked up the neighbor's stairs, and then over the wall. You can see the back door from the street. The only things he took were the back door keys and a Bluetooth player, we believe, which we don't really care much about. We made a barricade that would make noise if he came back and sat with knives and a big 2 prolonged fork until about 5 a.m. We had another lock, so Dad changed it the next day. I slept with the knife under my bed that night. Looking back, I wish I had done something. I played rugby for 2 years. I know the basics to tackle, but I couldn't move. Obviously because of fear, but my brain was also trying to understand what was going on. I probably could have taken him on. He was very thin and looked between 17 and 19. 20 at most, judging by his style and body. We think that we might know who did it, but they didn't technically break in. They only took 2 things. Walked past all of our valuables, and he didn't do anything to us. It almost looked like he was trying to get my attention as well. Almost as if it were a bet and he tried to find a reason to get out. Either that or he's the worst robber I've ever heard of. I'm just happy my sister wasn't bad. It probably would have been a different story if she had been there with us. A lot of people think they know how they would react in certain situations. I am living proof you don't. I thought I'd scream at least, but nothing. We now lock our doors every night. Every time I hear a noise, I get a little bit frightened, but I'm okay. If he wanted to hurt me, he would have tried. We got lucky. This just happened an hour ago, and I still can't shake the feeling. This evening, I needed to run to the grocery store with my husband and 2 of our kids. We all wore our masks and tried to make the trip as quick as possible. As we were leaving one area on one end of the store, an older gentleman, maybe in his mid-70s, was passing us. My daughter, who is only 7, had to let go of my hand to get on one side while I waited with the cart. He bent down and crowded her space so much that she was hunched against an end cap. He asked if she wanted to switch masks because hers was prettier than his. I immediately startled, feeling tingly all over, and my stomach started to knot. I quickly moved around to grab her hand, did the nervous lapping it off, and we started walking to the other end of the store. I still had this feeling, so when we got to the last aisle, I looked back. He was still standing there in the way, staring at her. He quickly looked away when he saw me watching him. I grabbed her hand tighter, filled my husband in, and we both became hyper aware of our surroundings. When going to check out, he was there, so we went to another aisle until he was out of the store. My husband knew one of the workers, and when we told him, he said the man was irregular and harmless. Maybe so, but that sick feeling was there for a reason. We paid for our things and scanned the parking lot when leaving. I hate that this is the world we live in. It may have always been this way, but I feel like everybody is more aware of it now. I'm well aware of the pandemic, by the way. I'm well aware that a family trip to the store may seem stupid. With my job, I have to be careful. I take all the precautions for my family and my kids. My kids 11, 10, and 7 have been stuck indoors for the better part of 3 months when their school got shut down. They only recently started going back part-time. 2 of the 3 have ADHD. That's not the most difficult thing for a child to have it, but it does suck so bad most of the time. But if they can get 5 minutes of normalcy in a small town, store during non-busy hours, then we mask up, wash hands, sanitize cars, and we go in. It gives them some much needed change and calms them down a bit, and it allows me to have a calm evening and get some sleep. I'm not sure if this even qualifies as creepy since it might just be a weird joke, but here goes nothing. My boyfriend and I went to a restaurant about 3 weeks ago, and the couple, let's call them Anna and Jack, that was sitting at the table behind us had some trouble with their credit card while paying for their drinks. We assumed they were tourists because they were speaking English, not a language often spoken in my country, and the elderly waiter didn't understand anything they were saying. So I turned around and asked them what was going on in order to help them out. For some reason, the guy's credit card was declined and they only had euros, which are still not an official currency here, so they couldn't pay with cash, and they were trying to ask the waiter where the nearest ATM was so that they could get some money and pay for their drinks. I then explained to the guy where he can find the ATM and told the waiter the guy would be right back and would take care of the bill. Since his girlfriend stayed in the restaurant and sat there waiting for him, I made a joke about how people over 50 can't speak a word of English in my country. And we started talking, so we invited her to sit with us because you could tell she was really uncomfortable just sitting there all by herself, waiting for her boyfriend to get back. Anyways, about 10 minutes later, her boyfriend came back, paid for the drinks, and they invited us to get a beer with them because we helped them with the waiter and all. So my boyfriend and I agreed, and we went to a nearby bar. We started talking, and it turned out they had just moved here 2 days ago. Not going to say from which country, but let's just say Scandinavia. And they moved into a house just 2 blocks away from our apartment. We started talking about random stuff, and Jack said they just watched the movie It that afternoon, that it's their favorite movie or something. And I mentioned that I was dead afraid of clowns and I get really uncomfortable even talking about them. We each had 2 beers and they both seemed pretty cool, so we told them we were having a couple of friends over on Saturday to play some board games and invited them to come since they didn't know anybody in the city. They said that sounded cool and we exchanged phone numbers. So here comes Saturday and our friends come to our place and we're waiting for Jack and Anna to come over. And Anna texts me that they're outside and they have a little surprise for me. I buzz them in and they come up. They ring the doorbell and my boyfriend lets them in. And I go on the hallway and they're both putting on Pennywise masks and waving at me while laughing. I got so creeped out that I started screaming. What the heck is wrong with you guys? And they just continued to laugh for like 10 seconds and then took off their masks and told me to relax and that it was only a joke. It was a very weird and awkward night after that. And they took off about an hour later because they had to take their dogs out for a walk or something. And to be honest, everybody felt relieved they went home so soon because they both came off as very rude and wouldn't even talk to our friends the whole night. She texted me around midnight saying she was sorry, and as soon as I texted her back saying it's not a big deal and everything is fine, even though that wasn't really true, she sent me a gif of a sad clown with sorry written under the pic. I don't know what the heck is wrong with both of them and why they thought messing with me like that is funny. What makes me more angry is the fact they were both so nice and seemed like a great couple to hang out with the day we met them, but turned out to be rude and weird. Both I and my boyfriend blocked their numbers and we hope we don't run into them anytime soon. This did not dawn on me until I had my own children and have hence been vigilant with stranger danger. Suddenly, one day, I sat up and realized the actual danger I was in and how close I came to who knows what. I was about 10 and staying with my grandma, something I did and loved for a week every holiday. My grandma lived in a new suburb on the outskirts of our city. Because it was new, there were a lot of new immigrants who started to move in there. There was a wave of immigration from Lebanon due to the war there, asylum seekers. This was a very white Australia, so my 10-year-old mind found these people bizarre with their different clothes, etc. Anyway, I was sort of playing by myself and sort of playing with the new kids in this church parking lot, down the road from my grandma's. I was the only blonde Anglo out of about 20 kids of all ages, 2 to 12 years old. I think that's why I may have been singled out, because I stood out. So this little girl about my age was sort of trying to play with me. She was so foreign to me with her hijab and long black dress, in a 40-degree Aussie summer. I blurted out to her, "Why are you wearing such an ugly dress?" Because I was raised by very compassionate parents, my shame rose up in me immediately, but no more than when I looked around to see if anybody heard me, and there stood a man just staring at me. I thought at the time he heard me. I was so ashamed and thought he might come over and speak to me about my mean girl comment, or tell my grandma, or worse, ring my parents. I was 10, and all adults had a line to each other, lol. I now realize he wasn't even close enough to hear me, but my 10-year-old head at the time thought him watch me from 10 meters away, sort of behind a tree, over 2 to 3 hours was because he was deciding how to punish me for my crime. Anyway, it started to get dark. Everybody started to disperse for bath, dinner, and bed. I got up and started to walk back. The man started to follow me. He followed me to my grandma's. I ran inside and shut and locked the door. I was waiting for his knocks to tell my grandma my crime, but instead nothing came. Phew, he must have changed his mind. But as I took a sneak peek out of the window, I saw him go down the side of the house. Oh no, he's going in the back to tell her. It's a shame. But nothing. Oh, thank you. Just as I was going to bed, I looked out my back window and there he was, smoking something, standing under the clothesline, still weighing up whether to tell my grandma. I kept taking sneak peeks and he was still there till I fell asleep. The next day, my grandma said my bedroom flash screen and my bathroom flash screen were off their windows. That I must have done it because they couldn't just fall off. She also said I was not to try and force my window open if it sticks next time, because all the wood around the window was all chipped and broken. I said no, I didn't do it, but she didn't believe me. Not a crotchety grandma, she let it go. And do you know I never ever connected that it must have been that man trying to get in? Because it was my window and my bathroom window. In my head, he was there to speak to grandma, so there was no connection. I never thought of him again until just last week. I'm an aware adult now, and have just realized how close I came to who knows what. Edit. My grandma was very security conscious, so all windows and doors were always latched shut at night, regardless of the weather. The windows were those old-fashioned push-in casement windows, so the flash screens were all on the outside, which in turn were nailed into the window, so they had to be pried off. So he went to a lot of effort to get them off and would have had to use a tool like a chisel or knife. Probably used the same tool to try and open the window, hence the broken wood. Not my story, but my dad's. Around 40 years ago, when my dad was still in college, he moved quite a ways from Vietnam to New Haven, Connecticut for college. He wanted to be as near as possible to his college, but also wanted to overlook the city skyline. He had already received the Form I-20 and went to the counselor at the U.S. Embassy to try and get an M student visa. He was a first-generation immigrant, and though he had taken a fair amount of English classes in Vietnam, he wasn't fluent and knew nothing about housing in America. This is why he went the cheap route and ended up renting out a sketchy place. Some sketchy apartment somewhere near Pine Tree Drive in West Haven. His landlord, as he told me later, gave off some serious red flags that he sort of brushed off because the apartment was only $250 a month. Firstly, the landlord's abode was directly next door to that of my dad's, and during his first night there, while he was getting unpacked, he heard a high-pitched screeching and weird opera music. Again, he brushed it off for the same reason as said above, and also because he was very tired. The next morning when he awoke, he noticed a chair by his bed that wasn't there before, and when he went to the bathroom, his toilet seat was up, though he recalled putting it down. Not only that, but his door was unlocked. He brushed it off again because he didn't want to stir anything up with his landlord by asking if he had come into his room or by asking if it had been broken into, therein implying that the apartment was insecure. He also wanted to explore West Haven as his college year did not begin until late August. He had come 3 weeks early as he left. He specifically remembered locking his door behind him, but when he returned after a few hours out, he noticed that not only had the door been unlocked, but it was slightly ajar. This went on for weeks until his college year began. Things slightly moved from where he had left them. Articles of food were missing from his fridge and other weird happenings occurred. Finally, my dad had had enough. One night, he decided to stay awake until very late and try to catch whoever was doing this red-handed. That night, he finished his homework and then got into bed, but he remained awake. And sure enough, at around 2 in the morning, he sees his door handle turning and a hand sliding through. My dad froze, with his blood running cold. He saw the landlord creep in and take some eggs from the fridge. Not only that, but the landlord then went to the bathroom, coming out a couple of minutes afterwards, and then he slipped out once again, leaving the door unlocked. This creeped my dad out like hell, which is understandable, but for some stupid reason, he still decided to stay at the apartment for a few more nights before he finally confronted the landlord. Money and wanting to save it does some stupid things to the brain, I guess. This was before mobile phones and even decent cameras that didn't cost more than $100, and so my dad had literally no way to get evidence to show the police, besides mere accusations. The next night, he once more heard the odd screeching and weird opera music coming from his landlord's room, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. That weekend, when his landlord went out shopping, he broke into his landlord's room, and what he found there was seriously disturbing. First of all, he found some weird sex doll, but when he investigated further, he found an old Kodak camera. Under this were some extremely low quality pictures of him in bed sleeping. He noped the heck out of there, obviously, taking the pictures with him and went to the police station. He moved out there shortly, and he later heard that this same landlord had scared other residents of the apartment off after hearing the odd screeching and opera music, and after seeing all of their things moved around. The building my dad lived in was since torn down, and my dad decided to just dorm at Sigma Chi. He had at first opted to stay away from fraternities because of the heavy partying. We never knew what happened to the landlord, only that he would be facing some prison time. I seriously hope he was never allowed to be a landlord again, though. This happened 2 hours ago, which in my time zone is approximately 1:15 a.m. I'm from Texas, born and raised, along with everybody else in my family. During the summer, a huge activity for every Texan, as well as non-Texans, is to go tubing down rivers. Unfortunately, due to work schedules, our friend group could never settle on a day in time to go tubing, especially considering that we lived about an hour away. Then we realized that we could just go at night after everyone is off work, which is completely legal, by the way. Several times this summer, we have floated the river without a hitch. We mostly worry about snakes. However, due to the cold water and cooler temperatures, they are not too much of a worry. But what happened tonight was much, much worse. My cousin just turned 21. To celebrate, we gathered up some of our friend group who could make it, which happened to be 6 males and 2 females. My cousin and I were the females. We floated it once through and decided that we wanted to go a second time, which I was opposed to, but I was definitely outnumbered. I had a funny feeling but brushed it off as being tired and cold. We skipped the beginning part of the river to be closer to the exit. However, that also meant we were closer to the darkest part of the river. But we had just floated it 20 minutes prior, so it should be fine, right? As we were floating into the darkness, we started to hear voices and finally see 2 males standing on the bank. One was heavier set, the other was skin and bones. They yelled, "Hey, do y'all want some marijuana?" We immediately told them no and proceeded to float by. I was at the back of the group with 2 males next to me. One was holding my hand, the other my tube. As my foot neared the bank, the heavier man reached out and grabbed a hold of my foot, jumping in after us, attempting to pull me out of the tub. The skinnier one jumped in after and lashed onto my tub in an attempt to separate me from the group. I was frozen and I couldn't move, couldn't think, I couldn't hear. I just knew I couldn't let my friends' hands go. They started harassing me, talking about my tits and how one of them had his hands full with his girlfriend, but the other was quote-unquote available. After a couple of seconds, they realized I wasn't letting go, so they backed off. When they backed off, a woman, out of nowhere, jumped into the middle of our group. She lashed onto tubes, then yelled, "I got some fishies," and began to make a cooing noise into the trees above us, asking everyone personal questions such as where we're from, how long we're staying, our names and ages, and finally asking for one of the guys' hats. Then she yelled, again, "I got some fishies," and began to make a cooing noise into the trees above us. We finally told her no, we needed to leave, and she said, "I don't have COVID, but I have corona," and proceeded to spit on one of the members in our group. Repeatedly as we floated on, separating ourselves from them while trying to remain calm, waiting to reach the exit, we heard them talking. More than just 3 of them. We made a dash to the nearest exit and ran to our cars. When we all realized we were safe, we began thinking and asking ourselves questions. How many people were out there up in the trees, hiding in the bushes, lying down on the bank above us? Had they followed us? Had they watched and waited for us to get in the darkest part of the river? We called the local authorities to report the incident. I don't know if this is the right place to post this, but I just had a flashback memory and would like your thoughts on the situation. When I, 15 female, became best friends with this girl who we'll call Allie. We ended up becoming more than friends, but our relationship was sweet and pretty innocent. Her family was middle class and Christian and lived in a suburban neighborhood. She got along with her parents, but the whole family dynamic was just a bit odd to me. She had one slightly older sister. Her parents were older than most in our friend group, like approaching 60, and her dad used to be a pastor or something. Some very religious career and had a lot to say about the Bible and such, which is why we were afraid to tell him we were in a gay relationship and just acted like besties. I remember early on Ellie telling me how they got kicked out of the church because of some very insane lies and rumors about them having some sort of sex ring in their house, and that CPS was called and is still an issue. I was confused, but it made her angry to talk about, so I didn't press on it. She seemed to believe none of it was based in reality, and that was the first weird thing. They didn't allow her to have her door closed, especially when she had friends over, but the house was empty most of the time. One day we were changing into swimsuits or something and turned away from each other. I was facing a mirror and I saw her dad peeking through the open door at us. We were both naked. I froze and pretended I didn't see him and hoped he'd go away. Then he was gone and never said anything. At the time, I thought it must have been an accident somehow, like he was just checking on us and didn't mean to see us naked. I don't know. Then Allie would tell me about these strange women who would come over and disappear into her parents' room for hours. Once her dad came back out to the kitchen, covered in sweat with a camera around his neck. Once he came into the room after Allie and I had a sleepover and she had gotten up to get ready for whatever. Sat with me on the bed and basically said that being gay is okay because I can't get his daughter pregnant and that it's a sin, but all sins are the same and that I might as well because we're all forgiven in the end, so nothing matters. I thought that was incredibly jarring at the time. I didn't know how he knew because we were only affectionate in private and even pretended to like boys. Never talked about it again. We broke up at age 17. There must have been more little weird things, but those are the main ones I remember. I don't know what I'm looking for posting this here, I guess. I'm just still confused about all of it. Edit. Another thing I just remembered is that they would have movies playing in the family room that my parents would have never played, like really intense sex scenes and such, and even when we were all eating dinner. I remember wanting to crawl out of my skin, but they acted like it was a normal movie scene. It blew my mind. In October 2020, I was working in a department store at guest services, and a woman came in with school supplies to return. She looked to be in her 40s and wore a scarf that covered her face and had in compliance with the mask order. She said the school supplies were a gift to the school, but she couldn't use them, so she was returning them. I had trouble finding the items in our system, and unfortunately for me, this gave her plenty of time to talk. At first, she was just texting with somebody using speech to text. Somebody who seemed to be checking up on her, asking where she was, what she was doing, and what she was thinking about God. She replied, "I'm at the store. I've been learning to ask God for things the way I would ask a husband." It gave me bad vibes, but I reminded myself it wasn't my business. Then the woman started talking to me again. She seemed dazed. Her speech was slow and odd, as if she didn't quite remember how to string words together, but not slurred or drunken. She went on for a while about how she suffered financial losses during the pandemic, but found a new church and having faith was everything to her now. Really, it is a blessing. Being deprived of things, even food. That's how you find God. She started getting a bit pushy, forcing a connection like she wanted to convert me, but I tried to be polite and ignore my hang-ups. A lot of customers needed emotional support at that time, and it wasn't the first conversation I'd had that was a little too personal for me. I said things like, "It's a dark time for you right now. It's important to have something to help you get through." All the time thinking, who is checking up on her? Did somebody deliberately deprive her of food? Is that why she's out of it, or is she in a cult? She kept staring at me the whole time I wrestled with the return and eventually noticed my scars. "My daughter has the same problem as you," she said out of the blue. So I told her that it's the devil making her do that. I didn't know what to say at that point, so I just kept updating her on the return. Then she started reading my name off my name tag over and over. Jesse, Jesse, Jesse. Slowly and strangely. It made me wish I hadn't worn my name tag that day. I didn't like her knowing my name. I didn't want her to know anything about me, really. I finished the return as quickly as I could and pushed the items I couldn't return back at her. "Sorry, but they're no longer in our system. Hope you can find a use for them." "Thank you." "And Jesse?" "Yes?" "Here's my face." She pulled down the green scarf and flashed a huge grin at me. "Okay," I said blankly, and she finally left. I signed out of the register and went to take 5 in the back room. I've had some bad interactions at work before, but this is by far the creepiest. I still wonder about this woman and her daughter. Did I meet a cult member? Was cult abuse leading her daughter to insanity, or was I just jumping to conclusions based on my own bad experiences and too much true crime? I hope they got away from any bad influences in their lives and are doing better, but also I hope this woman stays away from me. Hello there. A friend of mine suggested I tell this story after I told him it. I'll try to keep it short. My father died in 2009 after a heart attack, ironically while helping build a table in a church. I had recently turned 18 when it happened and was thrust in the unpleasant process of funeral arrangements. With the help from my family, we were able to set up a funeral at that very same church because life is ironic a lot. At that funeral, I was with my family greeting people at the door and showing them in. I was sullen, broken, and angry with the world at large as I shook each person's hand and offered them some token thanks for coming. I knew all the faces that came by, if some only distantly, until this woman came through the line with a very large wrapped package in her arms. Funerals, at least as I know them, aren't usually the time for gifts, so she immediately caught my attention. She was about 5'6" with long black curly hair and seemed to be in her late 50s, which would fit her knowing my father. She came up and shook my hand rather enthusiastically considering the setting and said, "Hi, I'm Monica. I know your dad very well and he'd want you to have this." As she pushed the package into my arms, I immediately felt it and knew it was a book. A big one. Not big as in thick, but long and wide in the cover, about 2 feet by 1 feet, respectively. This being not the time for it, I set it aside and continued the funeral, but not before she gave me a big hug out of nowhere. I assumed that Monica attended the funeral and left afterwards, but I never saw her leave. In fact, neither I nor any of my family had ever heard of her. I asked the people who helped me put it all together, and they had no idea who she was at all. No call logs, no social media messages, literally nothing. In fact, we kept my father's death specifically off of social media because even at the time I saw Facebook for being the incredibly terrible place that it had been proven to be. Nobody had heard of her, to the point that I thought she might be crashing random people's funerals. But she knew my father supposedly. I know this because inside the book she gave me is a handwritten inscription that is a bit too personable for me to share verbatim, but it was definitely referring to my father by name. Lastly, that inscription was written as though it was a gift being given to my father and was dated at the end with the date of his birthday in 1984, 25 years before the funeral. The funeral got done and sucked, as funerals do, and we started the process of going through all my dad's stuff. I eventually looked at the book we got, and it was called The Secret Teachings of All Ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy by Manly P. Hall. As I started to look through it, what first caught my attention was how expensive the book looked and felt. Thick parchment, a well-made spine cover, and meticulously written from what I could understand at the time. I'd only made it through 2 pages before my head just felt numb. The book is huge, but the font on the inside is pretty small comparatively. Then there were the illustrations. Massive full-page pictures depicting some of the weirdest symbology I'd ever seen. Pictures of gods, rituals, expensive tables on elements in different worlds. There's a picture just about every 3rd page, even more strange than the last. All the pictures looked old. I'm not an art guy, but this looks like the way old paintings were done. All of the illustrations were printed into the book, not drawn there originally. I've read a small bit more now that I'm older and can understand the writing a lot better. It seems to be written in a way that it describes the philosophy and rituals of each of the named groups, as well as the history of those rituals and the connecting line throughout. It does not take a stance on the validity of the information. Additionally, the edition I have is the Golden Anniversary edition, and I have found that the original edition was published in 1925. All of this is 100% true. I'll share a few pictures, including one of the illustrations I picked randomly. I really don't know what to do with the book. It could be worth something to sell, but for some reason I find that idea gross. I've been toying with making a YouTube series where I break it down a few pages at a time, but I think I'll only get views from moronic, anon people, and I don't want to feed that nonsense. I grew up around the world. My parents were divorced and they had joint custody, so every other year I lived with the other parent. Both their jobs required them to move every 1 to 3 years to a whole new country, so usually I'd only stay in one place for a year or two. I moved to India in 1995 as a freshman. This was the largest school I'd ever been to. I was fat, pimply, and scared of the new school. I've always been good at making friends, but this school was harder. Most of them lived here their whole life, so it's hard to break into those circles of friends. But a large portion were similar to me, moving often, though not as frequent. And even they weren't so receptive to new kids either. Every fall we did something at the school called a mini course, or maybe a mini trip. Anyway, everybody in high school had to sign up for a 5-day field trip. There were tons. It was a pretty big school. Seniors got priority, of course. Some trips were like sailing the Ganges, or hiking some mountain, or riding trains to Arca. I can't remember except for the 2 I went on. In my freshman year, I went rafting the Ganges. It's exactly what it sounds like. 6 kids in a raft with an experienced rafter, and we went down different portions of the Ganges and camped in tents. There were 2 sophomores. We will call them RJ and Steve, though those are not their real names. They were the snotty rich kids, pompous and arrogant. They seemed to take a real liking to picking on me. I had been made fun of before, but this was rough. One morning, they tied my clothes together and threw them in the water and tied them to a branch. Stuff like that. The chaperone was kind of a jerk about it too. He asked me who did it, and I said, well, I can't prove it, what does it matter? And he said, that's what I want to hear. I mean, he heard and witnessed the harassment and never intervened. I was never one to tattle though. That's just not something I was raised to do. Anyways, it sucked because the rest of the year I didn't have any problems, but every time I saw these 2, they always did or said something, just being general bullies. Slapping my lunch out of my hand or unzipping my bag so my books would fall out. Over the summer, I hit a growth spurt and I went on a diet. I shot up about 5 inches in 6 months, and with good food and exercise, I was looking pretty good. I even made the basketball team as a sophomore. The coach was the chaperone from the previous mini course, funny enough, and I had made some more friends. RJ and Steve were always into weed, but now I think they were into some other stuff too. They looked different the next year and acted majorly different. Meaner, generally irritable, and they still tried to pick on me, but when I used to walk away, I could feel like they thought they had won. Now I could tell walking away annoyed them and made them angrier. The mini course came around and the coach wanted me on cycling some mountains or a range, something like that. He thought it would be cool for my conditioning, so I went, and sure enough, RJ and Steve were on the trip as well. I had the room next to them at the hotel, and I smelled weed all the time. Then we'd go out and ride some portion of the hills, then back again, and they would be smoking. At dinners and stuff, they would make jokes about me. I kept ignoring them until one of the seniors berated them for being bullies. They loved it. They laughed, and really, I think they just liked the attention. Going up to my room, I saw them in the hallway, and they threatened me that if I told the chaperone they were smoking, that they would stab me. I said, I haven't told them yet. Why would I do it now? The next morning, I was told to hang back and pick up some stragglers. Since I was riding pretty well, usually it was some freshman or a less athletic kid in the back. This time it was RJ and Steve. I slowed down for them and told them that we only had 10 minutes to get to the top. Steve threw a stick at my wheel. Then they both sped off laughing. It didn't do anything, but they were laughing as they went around the corner and out of sight. Then I heard, "Oh crap," and "Stop." As I came around the corner, I saw them both falling off the mountain and into the trees. I slowed down and looked over the edge. I could see a branch poking through RJ's arm. He was looking up at me, then down, then up, very confused. I couldn't see Steve. For a reason not known to me today, I didn't do anything. I kept riding. I don't know why. I was raised to always do the right thing and help people, but at that moment, I felt like they deserved it. I know they didn't, but I thought they did for some reason. It was a real battle in my head. I got to the top of the mountain and the chaperone asked if everyone was up. I said, I think so, but I didn't see Steve or RJ. I don't know why I lied, but it was weird. It was so natural and I didn't even feel like I was saying it. The chaperone rode back down to the mountain to find them. The other chaperone guided us back on the route that we were going. When we got back to the hotel, they were loading RJ and Steve into a van. This was like 2 hours later, by the way. It wasn't an ambulance. I guess the van was faster. Anyways, they were bloodied and black in some spots. Steve's whole head was wrapped, and when he leant forward, blood would pour out of his nose like a faucet. Then the Indian guy would push his head back. I looked right at RJ and didn't say anything. He was on morphine or something and was completely out of it. There was so much blood on his shirt and pants. They both came back after Christmas break. RJ before Steve. RJ's arm was still in a cast and his foot was in a boot. Steve had this scar between his eyes where he fractured his skull. It was actually really bad. Something you definitely don't forget. His skull didn't look set right or something, like it kind of shifted. It wasn't as noticeable as the scar though. I heard them talking to girls sometimes, saying how the morphine felt so good and they should switch over to that. In general, they didn't seem all that different. They weren't humbled. The only difference was they never bullied me again. One time Steve said something and RJ stopped him. I only thought about that today because the company I'm freelancing with just acquired another startup. The last time I was working at a company that bought another company was in 2012. They were based in San Jose. Anyway, I wasn't so high up in the company that I'd be there for any implementation or integration that they were going to do. That's not even my department. But when our VP got back, he said it went well, but one of their engineers said, I thought my real name was coming. I really wanted to ask him something. I asked what his name was. He said Steve. It didn't ring a bell until he made a motion between his eyes, and I instantly knew it was him. So I said, yeah, if I ever need to go out there, I'll pop in and see what he wants. And then the VP said that wasn't possible because he was one of the people that was let go. In 2015, I actually had to go out there for some work, so I thought I'd ask around and see where I could find him. The project manager I was working with told me over lunch that it was a real mess and that he told her, I have a plan not to get fired. Once he did, he just went off the rails, got really into drugs, and died some other way. I did track him down on LinkedIn and Facebook, and he had passed away. His LinkedIn said that he worked at the company, so I'm pretty sure it was him. But I just wonder what his plan was to not get fired and that he wanted to tell me. I always wonder about the time I hear acquisition, especially now, and I honestly think about how I acted. It was so out of character for me. I don't necessarily feel guilty about it though, and it's weird. I really felt like I was on autopilot when it all happened. Okay, so buckle up because this is going to get weird. This isn't something unknown amongst my friends and the people local to me as I live in quite a small town. Please let me know if I broke any rules and I'll be sure to edit. So in grade 9, I would have been about 13 or 14. I had no friends. I was and still am kind of weird and it threw people off. Making friends in high school for me was so difficult because I refused to change who I was just to fit in. During the second week of school, I met George in my English class. Our school teacher had sat us next to each other and we had begun talking and building a friendship. George was very nice and we had a lot in common. He had come from a different elementary school. It was odd because the people from his elementary school commonly went to a different high school. Although he insisted that he wanted to go to this high school because there were certain classes he wanted to take that the other school didn't offer. After about a week of talking together during English, he asked if I wanted to eat lunch with him. We had the same lunch period and he said he noticed how often I sat alone to eat. I thought it was the nicest gesture, so I agreed. We ended up having lunch together for a while, but then I started to make some new friends. I always invited him to eat lunch with a few of the friends that I had made, but he always declined. Then one day in English class, he passed me a note. This was very strange since we were sitting right next to each other. The note said something like, I need to talk to you. Can we please sit alone together for lunch? I wrote back that I would sit with him and we hardly spoke the rest of the period. I got a really strange vibe. So it's lunchtime and I see him sitting at the end of the row. Our cafeteria consisted of large harvest tables and benches. It was not separate tables with chairs like you'd see in a restaurant, but rather long tables with benches on either side. I go to sit down and he says, no, we gotta go outside. So I agreed. He looked very upset and I wanted to know what was going on. When we got outside, he led me over to sit on a curb in front of the school and started talking very aggressively. He told me that it was unfair of me to make other friends when he was the one who befriended me first. He told me that I had to eat lunch with him because when I was alone, he ate lunch with me, so now that he's alone, I was obligated to eat with him. It was a very bizarre conversation. I explained that he could sit with me and my friends and that there wouldn't be any issues and he could even make some new ones. I told him I had enough friendship to spread around and that he had nothing to be upset about. What he said next completely shocked me. I could see the anger in his eyes. He grabbed my arm and said, I don't think you understand. You owe me this, and you will sit with me. I got completely freaked out at that point and told him that we could sit alone together every other day. I just wanted to get away from him and go back inside where more people were around. After this day, I started getting weird messages in my email. I'll never forget the first email I was sent. It said, "All women are Satan. The devil lives in you all." I didn't recognize the email address and assumed it was some internet troll trying to scare me. Then they started coming more frequently, all with the same type of message. I started getting scared, so I showed my friends these emails. They agreed it was weird, but also agreed that it was probably some random person trying to scare people. But my one friend Stacy told me that she thought it was George, that she had heard stories about why he came to our school instead of going to the high school his grade 8 graduating class was going to. She told me that he was obsessed with one of the girls in his class and that her mom actually got a restraining order against him over the summer. I told her that sounded insane and I didn't really believe it. I was still having lunch with George on alternate days and we were still friendly during English class, but I really wanted to distance myself from it. After Christmas break, our schedules changed for second semester. I was honestly very happy about this because I knew I'd have a different lunch period than George and we wouldn't have English together anymore. I could slowly dissociate myself from him, but I was wrong. He started leaving notes in my locker, confessing his undying love and explaining that we were meant to be, to take over the world together, which at the time I thought was very nice of him to say, but the feelings were not mutual. Eventually, I had to tell him that enough was enough. I explained that he was overwhelming me and that I needed a little bit more space from our friendship. He seemed to understand, and he didn't get upset or yell. He just agreed to give me my space, which lasted about 2 days before the emails started getting worse. Started threatening my life, telling me they knew where I lived and went to school. I went straight to my mom when this started happening. I know I probably should have done that sooner. She called the police, and the police informed the school, and the school looked up the email in their records and found out that it was George sending the nasty emails all along. George was suspended and wouldn't even look at me anymore. I was honestly relieved. 1 year after we graduated high school, George and his mother went for a drive. While she was driving, he stabbed her over 100 times. He had a psychotic break. When the police found him, he tried saying it was a car accident, but when they questioned him about all the stab wounds, he admitted to killing her and trying to release the devil from his mom's soul. He pleaded insanity against the murder of his own mom. He was found not criminally responsible for her murder. The story I'm about to share involves an active criminal case. I created a throwaway account and I'm going to keep a few of the details vague because I don't want to do anything that might cause this bastard to get off with anything less than he deserves. Life in prison, if not the needle. This happened a few years ago close to Christmas time. I work from home and have since the early 2000s. At the time, I was renting a house in a blue-collar middle-class neighborhood. One day, my son, who was in high school at the time, woke up with a raging headache, so I let him stay home. It was mid-morning when my doorbell rang. It wasn't unusual. The neighborhood we lived in was the kind of a prime spot for door-to-door solicitors, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the like. I yelled for my son to get it because he was so much better at getting rid of those types. No joke. The kid has this deadpan stare that would make the devil flinch. Then I just forgot about it. It wasn't until later that night that I even remembered it happened. I asked my son who it was. The landscaper. Gary? That seemed odd. Gary lived across the street from me and ran his own landscaping business. He only came over once in the winter to do some basic maintenance, and he'd just done that the weekend before. No, the other one. His son, I think. That was even weirder. Gary's stepson had moved in with him over the summer. I'd like to claim that my instincts were strong enough to know that something was off with the dude, but honestly, I barely knew he existed. Sometimes he helped Gary do my yard, but for the most part, we never even spoke. Him coming to my door didn't make any sense. What did he want? My son shrugged it off. Well, he didn't say. As soon as I opened the door, he just said sorry and left. Well, if it's important, he'll come back. This didn't come off as anything too concerning. From what I did know of Gary's stepson, he was awkward. Like, no eye contact. Grunting a hello awkward. I gave a passing thought to going over to Gary's to see what he needed, but decided not to bother. It all seemed not important. It wouldn't be until a few months later that I learned it was anything but that. I can't remember exactly how long after it happened, but it was probably less than a week before I got another knock on my door, again early in the morning. This time my son was at school, so I answered it. It was a police officer. They were canvassing the neighborhood looking for a woman who'd gone missing. She'd gone out for a jog a few days before and never come home. The police were asking pretty much everyone on their route if they'd seen anything. I looked at the picture, didn't recognize her, and let the officer know that. I never even thought about the weird visit from Gary's son because honestly, who on earth would have connected the two? They found the missing woman's body a few weeks later. I learned about that on the news. Her body was left in a county burn pile, the kind that landscapers in my area used to dispose of yard waste. That's how they traced it back to my landscaper's stepson. About a month after they found her body, he was arrested. I didn't learn about the arrest until I got another knock on the door. This time it was a police detective. He was following up because during the stepson's confession, he admitted that the woman jogger was a victim of opportunity. He'd seen her running past his house. It was about 11 a.m. and nobody was around because it was a weekday and most people in our neighborhood were at work or school, so he chased her down and abducted her. He also informed the detective that he planned to kill a woman that day. The problem was, when he went to his original target's home, her 6-foot, 230-pound teenage son answered the door instead. Realizing that trying to confront that kid would get his ass handed to him, he waited on the porch for a while, hoping that her kid would leave so he could try again. Then he saw the jogger. When the detective was talking, I was detached in a "why are you telling me all this" kind of way. Then I remembered that weird visit from the landscaper's son, and I hadn't realized I was the target he was talking about until then. If my son hadn't stayed home and hadn't answered the door that day, I would have been the woman they pulled out of the brush pile. My son's testimony became pretty important. It was used to show that the landscaper's son wasn't nuts when he committed the crime, as he was logical enough to plan out a murder. He just didn't get to kill the person he wanted to, that person being me. I still have a lot of guilt about everything that happened. First, because I put my son in front of a cold-blooded killer. If that cold-blooded killer wasn't a pussy who only went after people weaker than him, that day could have gone way different. Second, because some other lady technically died in my place. Logically, I know it's not my fault, but on that emotional, non-logical level, I feel horrible because I know if I'd opened the door that day, that lady would still be alive, but maybe I wouldn't be. And even knowing now what I didn't know then, I still wouldn't have answered the door. I was probably around 8 or 9. I lived in a nice little middle-class neighborhood. One of my best friends, Raven, lived across the street diagonally, one house down, so I often spent evenings at her home after school. Raven's mom would always call my mom to let her know I was leaving and to expect me in the next minute or so. This way, mom knew to unlock her front door. Often, she stood and watched from the screen door to make sure I got across okay. I had begun noticing this beat-up red car, possibly an old VW or Buick, that would pass by almost every night as I ran back across the street. I would always head home just after dark, so possibly around 8:30 anytime I was leaving Raven's house. It was always rolling super slow. The speed limit was 25 miles per hour, and I want to say this vehicle was passed at maybe half that. One night, as I was leaving perhaps a bit later than usual, I stepped out of the side door of Raven's house just as the car was about to pass the house completely. It stopped in the road and backed up as I approached the side of the road. The window rolled down just as the car stopped in front of me. A little woman with short red-brown hair and blue-framed glasses was smiling sweetly. "Hi, sweetheart, it's a little late for you to be out right now, isn't it?" she asked me. Her voice was low and pleasant. "Nah, Mom lets me, I'm just walking home." "Oh, how silly of your mom. There are all kinds of bad people out late at night. Where do you live? I'll give you a ride." Just then, my mom came bursting out of our front door and screamed, "Leave her alone," as she began running to me. The woman's pleasant demeanor dropped, and I heard her mutter a word, possibly "shit," as she slammed her foot on the gas and took off at well over the speed limit. She didn't stop at the nearby stop sign, just blasted through it to make her escape. I got a nice lecture that night, but also a lot of tight hugs. My mom was super glad that she chose to look out of the storm door to check on me instead of just letting me wander home. I could have been taken, and she told me as much. I can't remember if the police were called, but I never interacted with any officers. This doesn't end here though. Like most little kids, I really liked setting up lemonade stands. But unlike most little kids, I also enjoyed hand making and baking cakes and brownies and cookies, and also selling those in my lemonade stands. About 2 weeks after the prior incident, a beautiful sunny Saturday, Mom helped me with the baking and helped me make lemonade and set me up in the front yard with my sign. She had been paranoid ever since the prior incident and had hardly let me out of her sight aside from the school and the bus, and this was no different. She stayed outside with me all the while I sold my little treats to passersby, until she had to run to the restroom. It would obviously be a pain to take everything down and bring it inside, While she went and then to bring it all back out and set it up again. She figured I'd be okay for a few minutes, considering it was the middle of the afternoon, and usually predators aren't that stupid. Mom left me alone for several minutes while she went to the bathroom and presumably went to grab a snack, as she was gone for 10 or so minutes. A familiar face walked up about 8 minutes in. She appeared from around the bushes down the street. I didn't see her in the distance walking up. I honestly saw her stand up from behind some bushes and brush herself off and begin walking towards me. Her clothes were smart and sophisticated looking, almost like a pantsuit. It was a real clash with how ratty her car had been. But that same placating smile was on her face and her eyes glinted behind the same glasses. Ah, cute, a lemonade stand. Hi again, sweetie. Sorry for bothering you the other night. I didn't realize how close to home you were. Mom told me not to talk to you, so go away. I said it as meanly as I could muster, but Mom had rightfully made me so frightened of this woman that I'm sure I just sounded like the scared little girl I was. Come on now, Marie. She spoke my real name, first and last, and my eyes got big. I'm a good friend of your parents, and I live down the street. Remember, we met at the pool this past summer. I had no recollection of her. If you're the friend, why'd you leave so quick? Mom, I began shouting for my mom. This made her crouch down in the front of my table. Eye to eye with me. We don't need to do that. I just want to talk to you. You like to bake, right? I have a really fancy kitchen with a nice baker's oven. All sorts of cool gadgets to make baking cupcakes and stuff like this super fun. No. At this point, I'm literally screaming at the top of my lungs for my mom. I stood up and pushed the table into this woman and started running for the front door. This woman kicked the folding table away and started to chase me until my mom appeared in the doorway. She flung the door open and I barreled into her, and the woman stopped running and stood in the yard. What are you doing to my daughter? My mom shouted at her. Man, your child is rude. I was just trying to buy a cupcake and she shoved the table into me and ran. Now I have lemonade all over my clothes. The woman lied through her teeth. I don't think she was expecting my mom to come back. That's the lady from that night, in the car. I was now trying to get around my mom and hide behind her. My mom pulled out her cell phone and this time I know she called the police. The woman immediately ran off back the direction she came. The cops appeared. One took statements while the other one patrolled the neighborhood searching for her. They ended up finding her car parked at the grocery store that was up the road about half a mile at the other end of the neighborhood. They waited for her to show up and claim it, and she never did. They couldn't find her, and I never saw her again, though. This happened to me a few years ago. I live in Arizona, by the way, in the mighty Mojave. I was on my patio having just finished tracking 2 full trash cans of weeds and dead branches from my backyard. My dog, my little buddy, was, as usual for him, following me around like my shadow. It was a nice clear crystal blue day in early May, when it's not too hot and not too cold, and I was feeling pretty good. I became aware of a car pulling up in my driveway, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw that it was a big black SUV. At first, I thought it was an aunt of mine, the only person I know with one. I'm a little surprised by the sudden visit, but whatever. I scoot the trash cans to the side of my gate, and then turn to wave, suddenly stopping. It is at this point that I see the word sheriff written on the side in big red letters. Immediately, I start wondering if I had done something wrong. I was fairly certain that I hadn't, and that's when the thought that something happened to my mom and grandma popped into my head. They were both out at a casino that day, and now I start worrying that there was an accident, or maybe a carjacking. Then the deputy gets out. I see on his face a very large grin, and that threw me off. I approach my gate and quiet down my little buddy, who started growling, as he always does whenever someone or something started coming into the property. He approaches the gate, and I politely greet him. Hello there, officer. How can I help? I try to keep a cool exterior while I'm internally, frantically trying to think of a reason as why he would be here. Hello there, sir, he said, still smiling. Do you live here? Yes, sir. And are you the only person who lives here? He asked me. I'm still very nervous and confused, but I answer him. Yes. We got some calls of complaints about somebody at this address, he explained. I was thrown through another loop as I had not been expecting that being the reason. I generally keep to myself and I don't do things like shoot off fireworks or make a lot of noise, so I couldn't imagine what I could have done to warrant someone calling the police on me to complain. While this had been confusing enough already, I was sorely unprepared for what the officer had to say next. Yeah, we got a call from one of your neighbors that someone at this address, matching your description, has been climbing on the roof and firing a microwave gun into their head in order to change their thoughts. I stand there for what felt like half a minute, letting what he just said to me sink in. What? I asked after it had sunk in, not comprehending what I'd just been told really. He was still smiling, and it was now dawning on me that he was actively trying not to laugh, hence the smile, as he calmly repeated what he had said. I then asked him to repeat himself a third time, to which he complied, and my brain finally was able to accept this new piece of information. Several sets of new neighbors had been moving into the area, and one of them was a very odd man. We'll call him Weirdo. Well, Weirdo had moved into a house at the end of the street with his sister. At first he had seemed nice, if maybe a little bit too friendly, after creeping me and a bunch of people out with the weird things he would say, usually about his knife collection. He had also gone and said some very gross sexual things to my mom, who at the time had been working as a cashier at the general store. She almost tossed him out right then and there. His sister I felt bad for because she was constantly going around town apologizing for the things he would say and do. Anyways, I just knew that Weirdo had been the one to call and complain about me using an imaginary ray gun on him because that seemed in the ballpark of things he would do. Anyways, the officer told me that he was required to ask me if I had a microwave gun anywhere on the property. At that point in time, part of his job was to ask me if I was in possession of an imaginary ray gun. In a very calm voice, I said, "No, I don't even know what that would look like." "Neither do I," he said, shaking his head, letting out a chuckle. "But I had to ask, and have to ask you to please refrain from using one in the future." It was at that point that his composure slipped some more, and he started to laugh outright. While part of me did find it very funny as well, and I still do, a more pragmatic part of me started to worry about this Weirdo and his delusions involving me. I know that the vast majority of people with mental illnesses are not going to harm anyone, but this dude was constantly going on about his knives and now apparently had some kind of fixation on me. So I found it more unnerving than anything. Once the officer had regained his composure, yet was still smiling, he informed me that he could not tell me who it was that had called it in, but that he felt I should be aware of them. I told him that I had a pretty good idea of who it was and pointed down the street towards his house. He stopped me and said he was going somewhere else on the street and that I should really pay attention as to where he goes next. I nodded, and after he got back in his vehicle and backed out, I watched and waited for him to get to the Weirdo's house. He doesn't. He pulls into the driveway of the house right across the street from mine. I'm absolutely dumbfounded. As the man who had moved in, I had never spoken 2 words to or even met before. Out of some weird instinct, I ducked down and peeked out through the lattice next to my gate, not wanting to be seen. The officer pulled in and got out of his SUV. He walked right up to the front door and knocked. Instantly, just as he pulled his hand away, the door was wrenched open and out comes the owner screaming his head off. I couldn't quite understand what he was screaming, just that it was something along the lines of, "You can't be here." I was amazed by the composure of the deputy. He remained calm as this lunatic was screaming right in his face and was trying to calm him down. As soon as the guy was calmed down, he cussed at the officer, then stormed back inside and slammed the door behind him. I was afraid that he was going to look in my direction, so I had ducked down behind my fence, which my little buddy took to mean that I wanted to play. The officer drove off, and I heard nothing else about any complaints. Well, the next day, after I had told my mom about all of this, she went and spoke to her friend who was the real estate agent that sold him the house. For those who do not know already, my mom pretty much knows everybody in town. This is how she told me the conversation went. "You know that house you sold across the street from my son?" "Yeah." "Did she know that you sold it to a lunatic?" "Oh man, what do you do now?" I can't help but feel like either I or my mom or her friend should have gotten a phone call or something. Just a casual heads up. Apparently, this guy had a huge reputation in the local real estate community, at least from what my mom's friend hinted. I mean, I respect other people's privacy, but come on. Just a by the way, your neighbor might be slightly mentally ill or deranged or something. Well, not a full week later, I'm in my car driving home from the grocery store. I'm nearing my street and I smell some smoke, and my thought process was along the lines of, oh, someone's probably grilling. I think I'll start thawing and marinating some steaks and throw them on the grill tomorrow. Well, as I'm driving up my street towards my house, I see the lunatic standing in his front yard spraying his house with this garden hose. I just write it off as him being odd, but then I see my mom in my driveway frantically waving. I pull in to see what is happening and look behind me, now seeing the flames. I don't know how my eyes just kind of glazed over the smoke rising from his house, but I could see it now. My mom had seen it and come running, worried that it was my house, and then, seeing that it wasn't, worried that the main gas line would ignite and blow up. fire department shows up, I think 10 minutes later-ish, and gets to work on it. But the house is not salvageable. He did before they showed up. Start running in and pulling stuff out, and set it down in his front yard, going back in and repeating this multiple times. I counted 3 rifles and a handgun and lots of ammo amongst the pile in his front yard before the fire department arrived and one of the firefighters made him stop. I wasn't listening to what they were saying as I was hiding behind my fence again. I was terrified that this guy was going to jump to the conclusion that the guy with the microwave gun, whom he had called the police on, who had simply talked to him and did nothing else, might have had something to do with all of this. It was later discovered to be an electrical fire caused by faulty wiring. The house burnt down and almost completely to the ground. There were some walls and ceilings still kind of standing, but it was completely unsalvageable. The guy moved away and I didn't hear anything more about him. That was definitely one of the craziest things to happen out here. Definitely in my top 10. In 2008, I was 16 and living in a small town where you'd see the same faces over and over. One of them was this man, mid-30s, scruffy beard, worn-out jacket. Somebody I'd always assumed was just a local drifter. Then I started noticing him more often. He'd be outside the shop when I went in after school, leaning against the fence across from the school gates, or walking a little way behind me on my route home. Always just far enough to make me second-guess myself, but always seeming to be there. One Saturday afternoon, I was walking into town to meet a mate when I saw him at the bus stop. As I passed, he fell into step beside me. "All right, Ryan," he said. I froze for a second. Never even told him my name. He asked if I still lived up by the church. That was where my street was, but I'd never mentioned it to him. Then came more questions. "You usually get back from school around 3, right? Are you still playing football on Tuesdays? And does your mom still work at the post office?" The way he said it, it wasn't casual conversation. It was like he was checking his facts. I told him I had to go and sped up. He just smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll catch you another time." A few nights later, after football practice, it was dark and I was walking the quiet route home. From behind me, I heard that same voice. "Not many people out tonight. Good night for a walk." He was standing under a streetlight, hands in his pockets, just smiling. Then he said, "Your bedroom is the one at the back of the house, isn't it?" I didn't answer, just walked as fast as I could without running. After that, I started changing routes, times, everything. I never saw him again after a couple of weeks, but every time I walk home alone in the dark now, I half expect to hear his voice behind me. A few years later, I was flicking through the local paper and froze. There was his face staring back at me. The article said he'd been arrested for assaulting an elderly woman in her own home. They had a mugshot, and it was exactly how I remembered him. Scruffy beard, dead eyes, and that same unsettling smile. A lot of these posts are about men creeping out women, but this one is a little different. This one takes place in early 2010. I was 16 years old and played lacrosse. I liked girls, of course, but I didn't know much about flirting or anything. One day I was heading home with my lacrosse stuff and a woman walked up to me and asked if I played. I told her yes I did, and I was captain of my team since I was so proud of it. She said that was interesting and asked me how old I was. I told her 16, and she laughed and said she was 38 years old. After this, she told me I was cute and said she'd love to come to one of my lacrosse games. This woman told me to take her number down several times, so I did, but I didn't plan on texting her. The next day, I was talking to a teammate and I told him about the incident. He laughed and told me I was a liar. To prove it, I decided to text her and ask her age again. She responded with, "Baby, I'm 36. Hopefully I'm not too old for you. When's your next game?" I didn't know what to say, so I just showed him and didn't respond. She then double texted me and sent me a few nudes. I was really put off by this, so I told her I was going to practice and didn't respond. Later that night, she texted me and asked what I was doing and asked if I wanted to come over. I told her I can't because I'm doing homework. She told me she could help out and show me a few things, to which I said no, and had a mini panic attack. I turned my phone off and went to bed. A few days later, I was getting ready for my next game when I saw a familiar face in the stands. I looked closer and it's her. "Hi, Wheels," she says. My stomach dropped. I mustered the guts to wave back and tried to put it in the back of my mind, but I couldn't shake it. After the game, she came up to me and asked if I wanted to come over. I told her I normally shower after games, and she said I could use hers. I then told her that I and some teammates were hanging out and tried to walk off. This woman grabbed my arm and asked why I'd been dodging her. She asked if I was man enough for her and said I needed to stop playing games. My coach heard and came over and asked if everything was good, to which I said, heck no, tried to get her off me. My coach ended up restraining her while I backed away. As I'm walking away, I hear her say, whatever, calling me kind of homophobic slurs and even the N-word. I felt so sick I could have vomited. After this, I had to have a meeting with my coach, my parents, and the principal of my school. They explained to me that this woman was wrong and should not have sent me those messages or come to my game. They reassured me that I did nothing wrong, which is why I didn't tell them about this sooner, and that this woman was nutty as squirrel shit. I promised myself and my parents that if I ever saw her again, I'd press charges for stalking and for everything else she did. But I never did. Thanks for listening, guys. For those of you who frequent this sub, the fight or flight response is one that is discussed frequently. Later, this term was updated to fight, flight, or freeze to better encompass the range of human responses to acute stress. Luckily for me, I've never been a freezer. However, that doesn't mean that I always choose one of the other two responses either. Instead, when I am under stress, my brain goes into overdrive, rapidly throwing up possible solutions to my current problem. The more stressed I am, the faster it ticks. In my first post on this sub, I told of a creepy encounter where I chose flight. In the second, I chose to fight. This is the story when my brain decided on a different direction. It was early evening in the late 2000s. I was in college, walking home from class along a busy street in the crappy neighborhood that was all I could afford to live in at the time. Out of nowhere, a car pulls up right next to me and slams on the brakes. "Get in the car," the driver yells out the window at me, immediately aggressive. What? I take in the scene. An old small beat-up red car. 4 passengers, all young guys. Relatively fit. I'm badly outnumbered here. Not good. The 2 up front are leaning forward in their seats staring at me. Agitated, most likely on something. Can't see much of the guys in the back except that they're crammed in there. The front 2 are not wearing seatbelts. Really not good. On top of that, despite other people being around, I'm in a neighborhood in a city where people don't stop to help, don't usually call the cops, and don't get involved when they witness violence or crimes. No one walking past has slowed down or even turned our way. Really not good. So in the couple of seconds it takes me to soak this in, the driver decides to fill the silence. Get in the effing car. I said get in the car now. We are going to a party and you're coming with us. Even more aggressively than before. Oh boy. There goes my brain. Tick, 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 tick. This tone, this manner. This guy is expecting me to refuse. He's expecting me to get bitchy. It's like he is just waiting for me to escalate the interaction. This was before I was active online. I'd never heard of incels or MRAs or any of that stuff, but this guy is acting like a guy who is sick of girls refusing his advances. He has had enough, and this time he is going to put his foot down. My brain is throwing up every possible response I can make, playing out the most likely outcome, and knocking them back down one by one. Finally it lands, though I would not know what it is called until many years later. I had just discovered fawn mode. My face cracks into a huge smile. Wow, that sounds like so much fun. Suddenly, I drop the smile to a look of devastation. Oh no, but I can't today. I've got a dinner with my family. That sucks so much. I would rather go to a party, but thanks for inviting me. I start slowly walking up the street, not breaking eye contact, smiling and waving, but trying to close the distance. I'd have to dash if shit goes down. The car creeps along, keeping pace with me. The driver says, "Just get in the car," in far less aggressive way. Wow, I can't believe this is working, I think. I lean into the ditzy persona I have now adopted. I'd love to, really. I want to go so much, but my family is waiting for me up the street. But you guys are so nice. I hope you have a nice time. Next time for sure I'll go. You guys are super fun, right? Yeah, I can tell. The driver's posture is becoming less tense. His grip on the steering wheel is more relaxed, and is that the beginning of a reluctant grin lifting the side of his mouth? He likes the flattery. Damn, girl, you might just be able to shit talk your way out of this one yet. Yeah, you guys are super fun. Party with some cute guys? I'm so there. Call me for the next one. Promise me you'll call. I stick out my thumb and pinky to the side of my head and start nodding at them. You have to call me. The passenger starts nodding back first and finally slumps back in his seat. Yeah. I keep chattering. Have a lot of fun though. Have extra fun for me. Hate that I can't be there, but promise me you'll have a great time and promise me you'll call me for the next one. The driver finally leans back in his chair and smiles back. Yeah, alright. next time, and finally drove off. I wave at them. These dummies seem to have forgotten they don't know me from Eve and don't even have my number. I wave at them, wait for them to be out of sight, and finally breathe a sigh of relief. I power walk the last few hundred meters home, go upstairs to tell Matt and Lisa what happened. I probably don't need to mention that living in that city was getting old. So it was summer 2012. I had just quit working my job working for a clinic because the owner was a psycho. That's another wild story that I'll tell another time. I was pretty upset, and I was living in the downtown core of Toronto. I was really worried because I didn't have a backup plan, so I was desperately shooting out resumes everywhere, hoping I could find something quick. I get a call 2 weeks later for an interview. Some company called Ontario Consumers. They sell water heaters, but I had mostly done secretarial or admin work in the past, so I was under the impression that the position I applied for was of that nature. Maybe it was for an admin job at their office. The interview goes well and I'm hired. I'm ecstatic and promptly call my parents to let them know I got a job. I still didn't really know what the job was for. That was my biggest mistake, not inquiring further. I was just so happy I had a job and could continue to afford living in my apartment. The next morning at 9 a.m., I go through a training course. Another woman and I. The videos we watch are about water heaters and why they need to be maintained. They kind of hint that it's a sales position, but everything about it started to feel a little bit weird to me. Something about the people who worked there seemed a bit off, and it was only going to get weirder. I was introduced to my team lead, who took me, the only girl mind you, and a group of 5 20-something-year-old guys in a work van. I'm given my uniform, a stupid gray shirt that says Ontario Consumers and a baseball hat. We are driven to another building and it's packed full of other employees. In front of us are PlayStation 3s, flat-screen Sony TVs, iPads, top quality home appliances, and other various brand new electronics. A guy starts off the meeting. "Hey everybody, are you having a great day?" And everybody around me screams yes. I'm starting to feel a bit weird. Everyone looks unsettlingly happy, almost too happy. At the meeting, we are told how wonderful we are, and if we work hard, all of our dreams will come true. Yada yada yada. We can have anything we want. The new TV, the new washer and dryer set, etc. But only if we stay positive and work hard. I felt like I was sitting through a cult sermon. I wanted to leave, but I decided to stay because I needed to have a job. We are told about various success stories of other employees and how working for Ontario Consumers were the best job they ever had. After the meeting, the team lead, the 5 other guys, and I are all taken to Subway for lunch. The guys are being super nice to me and telling me I'll do great. Everybody keeps emphasizing, don't stop smiling and always stay positive. I feel unwell. Something isn't right about these folks. We get into the van and drive to some random North York neighborhood in Toronto. I leave my purse and belongings in the car as everyone else does. The boys all go off on their own and I'm told I'm shadowing the team lead for the day. This guy was so nice. Too nice. It made me feel uncomfortable. He smiled like he was deranged in some way. We go door to door, trying to get people to update their water heaters. His tactics are vile though. He doesn't outright say it to homeowners, but he acts like we've been sent by Enbridge, natural gas, or energy delivery company in Canada. He says, "Hi, I'm from Ontario Consumers. We were sent to check your water heater to make sure it's up to date and complies with industry standards." He pushes his way into the door. Do I take my shoes off here or leave them on? He did this over and over again, to homeowners who were seniors and homeowners who didn't even speak English. They were signing a contract for new water heaters without their knowledge, thinking they were just signing some paperwork confirming that somebody had checked the boiler. When I asked if we were scamming these people, his face went from happy to outright scary. He looked at me like I had committed some heinous crime. "Don't ever say that to me again. We are not scamming people." The look on his face really frightened me, and I was stuck with him alone. For a while, we walked house to house in silence. Some of the house's owners that opened the door seemed to be housewives, and my team lead always made an effort to flirt with them, and they loved it. The more he flirted with them, the less they paid attention to what they were signing. We walked for hours in the hot summer sun. I kept asking him when we got to go home, and he just said, "Well, it depends." I felt like I was in that Goosebumps book where the kids are made to trick or treat on Halloween for hours and hours by some aliens, not being allowed to stop, have to hit every house. It's been hours now that we've been outside, and I ask him what time it is. The sun has gone down and it's August, so it must have been late. He tells me it's 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, I'm thinking in my head. I freaking say, I have a date in an hour. I'm going to be late. I really did. With the guy who is now my boyfriend, by the way. I had no idea this job required you to work so late. I was only shadowing, so it wasn't a real work shift for me. I asked if I could go get my bag out of the car and just go home. The team lead said. No, my phone is in the van, so I can't even text my date that I'm going to be very late. The team lead says that we have to leave together. At 11, he takes me back to the van and we start driving around to find the other guys, and they all pile into the van as well. The lead says he feels bad about my date. Sure he did. I roll. And says he'll drop me off at home. I'm in such a hurry that I agree. When I get to my building, he steps outside with me and says, I like you. I want you to work for my team, and I think you'll be a good asset. I'm in such a rush, I just agree quickly that I'll be back in the morning for my next shift. Huge mistake. I go out for my date, have a wonderful evening, and then wake up the next morning for work. The job sucked and the hours were long, walking around with no breaks in the humidity. I guess I agreed to come back because I thought I could work this crappy job in the meantime, keep sending out resumes, and grab the next best job opportunity that comes my way. Day 2 was a bigger nightmare and actually quite scary for me. Went to this morning's cult-like pep talk again, grabbed lunch, and then headed for another neighborhood, this time around the Dundas West area, West Toronto. Also, we had a new team member with us. He was pretty quiet, and like me, he seemed uncomfortable too. This time the team lead says that he'll spend 3 hours with me going door to door, and that I'm on my own after that. This neighborhood had a lot of creepy old looking houses. The team lead had me trying to push my way into people's homes aggressively. I hated every second of this. I knew in my heart that it was a scam, but I wrestled with myself because I knew I needed the money. Even still, after I found out it was a commission-based position and my team lead relied on me to make him money, the more recruits, the more money, he was getting upset because I was too shy and not trying hard enough to make people sign contracts. At one point, this part still upsets me. We go into a house and the owner seems nice, but as soon as he closes the door with us inside, he pulls out his cell phone and starts filming us. I know what you were up to. You were the scum of the earth. I work for the Toronto Star and I know all about your scamming operation. I tried covering my face and began tearing up. The situation was getting out of control. The guy uttered more threats at me, saying he'd share the video everywhere and actually threatening to physically harm my team lead. I saw my chance and bolted out the door. The team lead followed behind me and the man yelled at us if we ever stepped on his property again, he'd call the police. One of his neighbors was on their porch and he screamed at them, "Don't trust these little shits. They're going to rip you off." My heart was pounding and my team lead suggested that we walk farther away down the street before we start again. We did a few more houses together and then he told me I was too good to go off by myself. I'm really shy and sensitive and the idea of having to go into people's homes on my own frightened me. Also, in my experience, most spoilers are in people's basements. Every house I entered, my heart was pounding. I was so thankful when a little old lady would open the door. I'd explain why I was there, go to the basement, and because I didn't want to scam people, I just couldn't do it. I would just look at the boiler's last inspection date and say, "Okay, ma'am, looks like your boiler is just fine," and run out of there. I went into one guy's house and he was home alone, and he stood so close to me the entire time. I didn't like how close he was, and he kept touching my shoulders and the small part of my back. Better believe I got out of there so fast. At the end of the day, I came back to the van. I didn't sell a single boiler, and I'm glad. The team lead, however, was not, and said I lacked a positive attitude and enthusiasm. The guys got in the van, and we started to drive away when I looked back in the van and saw the other new guy was missing. I informed the lead, and he acted like he didn't care. I saw the guy had left his sunglasses, a book, and his cell phone behind, and we needed to drive around to find him. We drove around for a total of 5 minutes, and then the team lead said, "No, guess he went home. Let's get out of here and go home too." I complained. "He barely looked," I said. "He's got to be around here." The lead ignored me and drove us back to the office. As soon as we got there, I left as quickly as I could and went home. I got into bed and called my parents and told them about my day and how upset I was by the job. It really drained my energy, and I felt like I had to be on high alert all the time in people's creepy basements, especially a 5-foot female like myself. When I told my dad about being in basements alone, my dad is super overprotective, by the way, and worrisome. He demanded I quit. I told him I already planned to. 2 days of this garbage was enough for me. I go to sleep feeling thankful the day is over. The next morning, around the time I should have gone to work, I called the team lead. Our conversation as follows. Me. "Hi, Brad." "Hey, where are you?" he said. "We're about to start." "I'm not coming. After yesterday, I decided I'm going to quit." His voice went from upbeat and bubbly to angry. "What do you mean you quit?" I just didn't feel comfortable yesterday after that guy filmed us, and then me being sent into basements alone in homes of people I don't know. It's not safe. That's BS. This job is safe. There are plenty of other girls doing this job. So what if something did happen to me and I didn't show up to the van at the end of the night? Would you have left me behind like the other guy last night? Now I'm yelling. He doesn't answer my question. Stop acting like that, and don't let the team down. I'm really disappointed in you. I thought you had potential. No, I'm done. I don't feel safe, and you don't care about the well-being of your team. So screw you, Brad. I hung up the phone and never went back. So, team lead and the rest of Ontario consumers, you can screw right off. Multi-level marketing jobs are the worst. FYI, if you're in Canada and somebody like this comes to your door, saying they want to inspect your water heater or boiler, try to scare you into signing a 10+ year contract for a new free water heater, it's a scam. To avoid such a scam, tell the salesman and asshole that you are not the homeowners. They are by law not allowed to make any changes to a home without the actual homeowner's consent. Just tell them you rent the house instead. When I was pregnant with my first child, who was born in 2013, I joined an online birth club, community for moms who were due the same month. Eventually, this led to a smaller Facebook group which allowed for more personal conversations. As you can imagine, being in a group of people whose only common connection is when your kid is born can lead to coming across some interesting characters, who you would probably never interact with otherwise. Anyways, over time bonds were formed and moms shared a lot of their daily life, whether it was about their kids or otherwise. Among this group was Leslie Villatoro. Almost a year after our February 10th, 2013 babies were born, she announced another pregnancy and she was due in June 2014. Of course, everybody congratulated her and was looking forward to the new updates. Leslie mostly posted about her everyday life and her twins, annoyances living with her sister-in-law, feeling stuck, and how she and her family were really struggling for money and couldn't wait to be able to move into their own place. These posts about their financial issues got more and more detailed and frequent, and some people sent baby supplies to try and help out a struggling mom. With her due date approaching about 4 weeks away, another mom posted and tagged her to check on her and ask how everything was going, since she had seemed to completely stop posting and commenting in the group. Somebody got the idea to Google her name, and that's when the news story popped up that about 3 weeks prior to this post to check on her, Leslie was arrested for her connection to her boyfriend's attempted murder of a woman in their town. This sent the entire group down a rabbit hole of Facebook investigation and piecing together the story until all the details came out and her trial started. Leslie's side is that she was dropping her boyfriend Chad Horn off to a friend's house and was waiting in a nearby park to pick him up when he was done there, and that she had no knowledge of what he was there to do. She had her twin 1-year-old daughters and nephew in the car with her and was obviously 9 months pregnant at the time. The real story is that she was his getaway driver and he was hired as a hitman to kill the woman he was dropped off to. She purchased supplies that Chad took with him to use in the attack, which were ultimately what led her to a guilty verdict and being complicit with the crimes. Chad forced his way into the home at gunpoint while this woman and her 2 children were home. He made her go out and start her vehicle while he stayed inside with her and the kids. And when she came back, he bound her hands with zip ties, slit her throat, and fired 1 shot at her, which missed, then fled the home in the woman's car. The woman survived all of this and was able to get to the neighbor's house for help. Chad called 911 twice to try to report 2 made-up shootings at different locations to lead them away. There was a police chase with him, and he ended up dying somehow. There was a suspect who may have hired Chad for a hit on this woman, but no evidence has been found on him either. After 70, search warrants have been issued. After much Facebook stalking from the group at the time of this trial, we suspected that it may have been the woman's ex-husband. Just speculation though, as none of it has been confirmed. She was married to a woman at the time of this hit, and I'm assuming her children are from her previous marriage. Again, this is all speculation, but it seems the likely answer for me. There was a lot of doubt surrounding Leslie's trial. Some jurors that gave a guilty verdict came out and said they regretted it later and wished they could change it, that she shouldn't be held accountable for Chad's crimes and intentions. I personally believe without a doubt that Leslie knew what Chad intended to do. I think their sole motive was money, with all of her posts in the group being about their financial struggles, and she was growing more and more desperate to get out of the sister's house because they were not happy there. Whether or not she knew the details of this family or would have agreed to help, knowing the woman's young kids were also home, Who knows, but I do believe she knew her role was to be the getaway driver for Chad. Leslie was found guilty in 2015 for her part in the attempted murder, burglary, kidnapping, and sentenced to 43 years in prison. I was texting with the girl I was interested in. We had hung out at my place playing pool and darts a few times, but we had yet to go on our first official date. During the course of our text conversation, I had brought up my love for the outdoors and camping. She said she loved that stuff too. Let's go. This made me happy. I asked her when she wanted to do it, and she said, right now, silly. Camping is something that you typically plan for at least a little bit, I thought, but I had all the equipment, a fridge full of beer, and some food to throw over a fire. I know of more spots than the average SoCal resident, and it's only 8 o'clock, so I enthusiastically said, yeah, let's do it. I love impulsive adventures, but still, what a strange girl. She was hanging out with her friend that I had never met, and I was hanging out with my boss from the country club I bartended at. And both of our friends agreed it would be fun, but maybe with less enthusiasm F and I had about it. Due to the no-name rule, I'll be using initials for the entirety of this post. Instead of picking them up, they decided they want us to drive over. Then they would be waiting in the car and would follow us to the campsite. I found out later that F's friend K wanted a quick out if she wasn't feeling it. I and my buddy E get to their house, and they're already waiting in a running car for us. Off we go to my favorite spot, and they're following close behind. An hour and a half later, we get to my favorite camp and it's closed. Oh no. I took us to one out of the way, and I don't know of any others in this area. I decided to just wing it and drive north. Surely we'll find something. We end up passing a small camp called Lake Peru. I think it was Peru. It'd been a while, but if it wasn't Peru, then it was something in that area. We pull into a mostly empty camp, and I find a great spot well removed from all of the other sites. It's surrounded 200 degrees by a wall of thick and tall oaks. We all get out of our vehicles, and I see F for the first time that night. She had on full makeup, knee-high boots, and a small dress. What a strange girl. I burst out in laughter. I couldn't help myself, almost in tears laughing. I asked her, what are you wearing? You knew I said camping, right? Do you have something to change into? With no shame, she looked me right in the eye and said she wanted to look good for me. And yes, she had a change of clothes, but she was quite happy at the moment. She assured me she is quite competent at all things outdoors and that she knows what she's doing. I did not believe that for a moment. Over the years, she proved me wrong, though, showing herself to be accomplished at climbing and canyoneering, knowing more knots than me and being able to swing an axe like a lumberjack, but at the time, I was secretly thinking this had to be her first time in the woods. Our friends didn't hit it off, not even a little bit. About an hour into hanging out, Kay retired to the tent that I gave her to share with my buddy, and my buddy decided to go sleep in the car. So it's just me and F hanging out having a great time. She's still in club clothes, and we decide to go on a little night hike. Come to this little clearing in the woods and are staring up at the beautiful stars in the night sky. We hear a snap in the bush about 20 feet away. F gives me a worried look and says we need to go back. I try not to mock her when I tell her that the woods have animals. There's literally nothing to worry about in this area. The only thing that's even a little dangerous in these parts is a mountain lion, and we had a better chance of getting simultaneously struck by lightning and bitten by a shark than we had of a lion attacking a person and a half. She's tiny. Dumb joke. She tells me she knows all of this stuff, but this is different. She insisted that she can sense danger and that we need to go now. I could sense her genuine fear, so I didn't try to convince her of how irrational she was acting yet. I decided to lead her back to camp. She relaxed for about 10 minutes, then was right back to her happy extroverted self. She directed me to sit in a chair where I was facing the fire with the thickest of the woods directly in my line of sight behind that. She brought out an old CD player and hit play. Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen started playing as she walked behind the fire and started dancing seductively. Not trashy. Stripper seductive, but slow, classy, fluid movements. She was casting a 40-foot shadow on the wall of trees behind her, so that I was seeing a bonfire. Beautiful F dancing directly behind the flames that were licking the night sky. And behind that, a massive 40-foot giant shadow imitating her every move. Combined with it being the first time I'd ever heard the Leonard Cohen song and the overall ambience, I was transported to another world. It was surreal. Beautiful even. I think this is when I fell in love. But still, what a strange girl. I was speechless after her performance. I didn't compliment her because there weren't words to express how moved I was. I think the look on my face gave away how blown away I was. She left, kissed me on my forehead, and finally went and changed into camp clothes. We sat talking as the fire cracked rhythmically, which kept me in a mildly euphoric state. Then there was another loud and obvious snap in the woods. She had a torch in her hand and directed the beam into the forest. I was actually a little bit surprised when she caught a set of glowing eyes just staring at us. In a whisper, she asked me what it is. I laugh and tell her that it's probably a raccoon, but it could be literally dozens of things. But the one thing I'm positive of is that it's not dangerous. She bluntly tells me that I'm wrong and that we are absolutely in danger. As I do every time camping, I sit by the fire with a pocket knife and a piece of wood, trying to whittle some sort of sculpture. I've done this at least 100 times and nothing has ever come out of it, except maybe the thing that kind of sort of reassembled the spoon that one time. Every time there was a noise in the bush, F snapped a flashlight beam in his direction. About half the time she was catching glowing eyes and she was on edge. I was going overboard pressing that it was nothing, which relaxed her a bit, but it was obvious that she trusted her instincts a little bit more than my confidence. More snaps in the brush. This time the flashlight beam picked up multiple sets of eyes. Odd. This makes me nearly positive that it's raccoons. Over the next 4 hours, F's vigilance on the flashlight would have made World War II plane spotters jealous. As our fire dies almost completely out and we're encompassed by the pitch black of night, it is obvious that whatever family of the little critters that's off in the woods has taken quite an interest to us. There are sets of eyes that have us half surrounded for at least 180 degrees. When F used to tell this story, there were dozens of eyes. I can't confirm that because honestly I wasn't that interested in it. I'm personally sure it was at least 7 or 8 sets of eyes that I saw from how completely we were surrounded. But like I said, I wasn't really paying attention. F swears it was dozens. She is 100% on this. I don't really have any reason not to believe her because she was the one super tuned in to what was happening. The fire goes completely out. F does another sweep with the light. The glowing eyes are right smack up at the perimeter on the oak wall next to our camp. For the first time, I'm a tiny bit unnerved. Another sound. She clicks on the light. What she saw, not 5 feet from where me, is sitting is a large wolf head down to the ground, butt in the air in obvious pounce position. Its teeth were bared and nose wrinkled in a snarl. I saw the same thing minus the teeth. My logical brain knows there are no wolves in that area and haven't been for a very long time. What was sitting there coiled ready to smoke me had to be the biggest coyote I've ever seen. In SoCal, these are typically skinny, unhealthy, fearful animals. This thing was massive, had a full coat, and was 100% creeping on me. I've spent so many hundreds of hours in this wilderness, and I've never seen anything like it. Everybody who knows me and F knows this is a true story, but people that don't know us don't believe us, and honestly, I don't blame them. It's so far removed from typical coyote characteristic that I can't even begin to explain it, but I swear on everything that it's true. So the wolf coyote thing is ready to pounce, and in that moment, that F isn't proud of, she drops the light and screams a blood-curdling scream that would have secured her as a B-movie horror actress for a generation. The light blinks out as it hits the ground and I pop from my chair blindly holding my little pocket knife in front of me. It only took me a second or two to realize the coyote wasn't going to attack because it was literally almost on me. The attack would have happened already. I pick the light off the ground and give it some taps and it comes to life. No wolf, no coyote, no glowing eyes. I think F's scream scared them back to Wyoming. E and K pop out of the car and tent. People from other campsites come running up. We tell the story a few times as new people keep arriving to see what the fuss was about. F insisted that it was wolves. It couldn't have been, but it's not a fight I'm going to take after she was right about everything else. K is scared to death. She pulls my buddy E into the tent to keep her safe. F and I calm down enough to crawl into our tent. About 30 minutes later, there's an earthquake. She looks me in the eyes and quite seriously says that we made that happen. In loving memory of FFG, I miss you. You always told this thing better than I. Really not the way I wanted to spend my Saturday morning, but sadly, here we are. Writing this as I sit down more scared and anxious than I have ever been beyond belief. I'm a 25-year-old female who was at my friend's flat, female and her sister and also another female friend. Lots of good vibes and laughs. Just normal girly time. At some point a trusted nice guy, a bit of a simp, but somebody we wouldn't feel uncomfortable around. Women know what I mean by this, especially about the nice best friend to girl guy. Anyway, he was very approachable at first. Very polite and sweet. but I was always told to never trust anyone who is too nice on first appearance. It's usually an overcompensation for something or to hide something evidently darker, as I found out later on. He slowly became more argumentative and had a very patronizing, condescending tone, which would arise for no reason. He acted like he was being completely normal despite being passive-aggressive. It was a quick turn. Moving on, he attempted to take my water bottle. Sounds stupid, I know, and insisted to everyone for no reason when I took it back out of his pocket, which is weird. Anyway, who puts someone else's Evian bottle in their pocket? He then insisted it was his and brought it in with him and genuinely seemed to believe it was. This is when I got a weird gut feeling that something wasn't right. We then proceeded to have a back and forth. Nothing harsh was said, but I told him he thinks he's the smartest person in the room and I could see right through him. Quite an assumption to make about someone, but as humans we sense danger. Well, not everyone sadly, but hey, please learn from this story. Then to top this already slightly alarming experience, he started pulling very vulgar sex faces and making hand motions gesturing to penetrating me. Example, he spread his fingers in the air and proceeded to flick his tongue in, not even a joke type way between mates. He did it every time he got the chance. He was pretending to do some weird sex motion. Needless to say, I was very disgusted and I barely even knew him, and it wasn't in a banter type way where it was left off a little one-off, but he repeatedly did it. He did this to me as no one was looking and stood slightly behind my friend who was talking so he could make these ugly gestures to me. He kept asking me to come back to his and told me he wants to take me abroad as he needs someone to look after him when drunk. I told him I'm not a babysitter in a bit of a joke way, and he went straight away and very stiff and defensive. The slightest thing seemed to trigger him. After being in a high alert abusive situation for many years, sadly you recognize even more so that something in the air just isn't right. Even if you're not 100% of your gut feeling, always follow it because it is there for a reason. There's absolutely no need for taking chances. Sadly, the world is too unkind. Anyway, my friend had gone to bed. Friend's sister was getting ready to leave, but I was very reluctant to be left alone with him for obvious reasons. She ordered a taxi and asked him to walk her out to the taxi. He agreed, and I told him very bluntly I'm locking him out, and his immediate response in a very nonchalant manner was, yeah, I would. That for some reason was that made me double down wholeheartedly on making sure I locked him out. Despite my friends maybe getting upset that I've locked another friend out, I wasn't too concerned about what they would say, as I knew in my heart this man had horrible intentions. I got the vibe he was pre-warning me, a bit like an animal playing with his food before eating. He was enjoying being weird and making me feel weird. As he walked out the door with my friend, I immediately locked the door. And I'm thankful that I did that because usually I am a complete fairy and would forget, but in this instance, I am forever grateful I turned the lock. Thinking I was free of this weird creep, I heard talking at the door and somebody trying to slightly push open it. I told him I was feeling scared and didn't feel comfortable at all in his presence. I called him a weirdo and a creep, and his response was, I'm not that weird, but said in an inquisitive way like he was trying to convince himself, and at no point did he take offense to my dramatic accusations and labels. I told him he had suppressed sexual urges. Bear in mind, this is at 3 a.m. in a block of flats and we were having a conversation through the locked door, and he won't be taking them out on me. He then proceeded to say, aw, but not in a cute way, in a very apathetic, weird tone. Even in these interactions, I was panicking more because instead of just thinking he was a runaround normal creep, I was digging into something much weirder and darker. He proceeded to attempt to open the door again, begging to just talk to me for 2 minutes, and weirdly enough, I couldn't make out if it was actually him through the door, as I have bad eyes, but I knew it was him obviously due to the convo we had. He stood outside for 15 minutes pretending to book a taxi and kept repeating that our mutual friend was gone. He then left and I was on high alert, so I was standing by the door, and out of nowhere, a white guy, the original guy in the story, is biracial, walked in, so I noticed straight away it wasn't the same person. He walked straight over to the door and covered the peephole with his thumb. This made my heart literally quiver. I was scared for my safety in a way that was very unsettling, and I hope no one else feels that fear, but those that have know your heart just sinks in a horrible way. This door was the only thing separating me from an utter evil predator. What made it so weird was that he was attempting to get a friend to come around and let's all go out uptown. It was weird as nobody was dressed for such outings, but looking back, that second guy who came to the door ever so randomly and covered the peephole looks like he left something on the floor, but I am obviously not going outside to check. As I panicked so bad, I don't remember if I saw him leave the little hallway / communal entrance, but I'm not sure if he did. I woke my friend to tell her. She could see I was so scared. I told her what happened, and she said she had never had anything like this happen and that she doesn't know any other older type white guys. She is a 24-year-old Jamaican woman and just doesn't happen to know any middle-aged white guys. It wouldn't have been so scary, but the way he just came right out to the door and immediately covered the peephole like he knew somebody would be looking through there. I believe maybe this was connected because what are the odds of this happening so close to each other? About 10 minutes difference and not having some form of connection. Either way, please remember locking doors saves lives. Simple as that. If that door had been opened when he had attempted due to being unlocked, who knows what I would have endured, and I have never had anything this creepy happen, and I live in a big city and have lived a slightly unconventional lifestyle, so I've seen it all. People are very dangerous, so please be aware. If you feel something isn't right, it's probably not. This happened 2 years ago when I went to Ibiza with a friend for a week during the summer holidays. First of all, the trip began quite weirdly with our luggage being flown to another country by mistake. It was quite interesting not to have any change of clothes in such a heat. Also, I know a lot of people love Ibiza and consider it a great place to party. My experience was quite different. My friends and I bought tickets to a few shows in advance to see DJs that we liked, but we ended up never seeing their performance. We always arrived a bit in advance. The DJs were very late, or the time of the show was wrong on our tickets, and the music at the clubs wasn't to our liking and was especially loud. We ended up having headaches quite rapidly and going home before even witnessing the opening songs for our favorite artists. Anyways, apart from those pre-booked shows, we had some free nights left. Basically, we failed our arrangements because we picked a nice hotel on the south coast of the island, which was mostly occupied by older people. The atmosphere was calm and quite nice for a family holiday, but not for 23-year-olds thirsting for a week of partying. To meet new people, we were basically forced during the day to go online, and we chose the app Tinder to provide us with multiple types of opportunities. The story I'm about to tell is one that still makes me flinch when I think about it. That night, my friends got a date on Tinder with a rich Russian girl who invited him over to her 5-star hotel. I was very happy for him, but I was left alone and didn't quite know what to do with myself. I come from Geneva, and during my teenage years, I spent a lot of time with a very good gay friend of mine. Knowing the time of ambience gay bars and clubs usually have, I decided to search for one in Ibiza and to go there simply to meet open-minded people and have a good chat. I found a bar not too far away, like 30 minutes on foot, and went there. I must admit, I wasn't really reassured walking alone in the dark streets of the city, but staying in the light of the lampposts were enough to comfort me. When I finally arrived at the bar, I was greeted by an atmosphere quite different from what I'm used to. The main activity was on the terrace, where there were a lot of high tables around, which people talked standing. No great laughs, no dancing, no mixing between groups. To get in the mood for initiating conversation with people not as open as I expected, I went inside and noted that nobody was there except for the bartender, who greeted me with a smile and talked to me with enthusiasm. That type of socialization is exactly what I'm used to at such places, and it warmed my heart to realize that at least one person was friendly. Hoping that only initiating contact with the people outside was enough to get them to welcome a stranger and share a talk with her, I went to the terrace and asked for a lighter. What I got was basically, "Wow, she's alone. Sucks," or even, "How stupid are you, a heterosexual coming to a homosexual establishment?" punctuated by mocking laughs. Bitter disappointment. Having walked a great distance to come to this place, I decided to have a last drink before seeking a more open-minded bar nearby, so I returned inside and shared my experience with the friendly bartender. He comforted me by telling me those people were idiots and that I had my place among them, then offered me a few free shots, which he weirdly drank with me. He clearly didn't want me to go, and since he was nicer than people I met that night, I didn't want to disappoint and kept smiling. I still tried to nicely refuse more alcohol, which I felt that I didn't need because of my thoughts of returning to the hotel after this unwelcomed experience. Anyways, I managed to declare my probably 5th shot in a row as my last and asked for the directions to the bathroom, which I wanted to visit before a probably long walk back to the hotel. The bartender explained that it was in the corner of the room, showing it to me from his bar. So I went there, and after trying the door, realized the bathroom was already occupied, so I stood in front of it, waiting for the person inside to leave. For the rest of the story to be clear, I'll specify that there was a 2-meter wall hiding my sight from the bar. After 30 seconds or so of waiting, I see the light of the bathroom going out and hear the person inside crying out in frustration. About a moment later, the bartender appeared behind me and placed his hands on me, pressing me against the wall. Having drunk a few shots moments before, I was quite slow to react and only managed to get in a cocoon-like defensive position when I realized my stops and no's didn't resonate with him. Fortunately for me, the guy that was in the bathroom got out after a minute or so, which made the bartender flee. I then used the bathroom and got out of that place as fast as I could, then called the cab and went back to the hotel shaken up. It's only later that I realized two things. One, based on my experience, I didn't even consider the possibility of the bartender being interested in women, which was a mistake. Two, there must have been a distant switch for the light in the bathroom at the bar. The objective of the bartender was to turn off the light while I was in the toilet and to insert himself inside. Probably to assault me somehow. No need to say that I got very lucky and that this experience has taught me to never underestimate any situation. Fun fact, I sent a text to my friend saying something very bad just happened to me and that I was going back to the hotel, to which he replied, "Haha, okay. Yeah, pheromones." He cried the next day when he realized what happened. I never held a grudge against him because there was simply nothing he could have done, except shorten his night and deny himself a fun and physical time. I've never gone out alone since, but, well, COVID wouldn't have it anyway. I don't plan on visiting any other bars or clubs alone in the future, and I respect the people who have the courage to do so, knowing all that could happen to them. I hope none of you have to meet cutting bartenders like that, so peace out. Okay, so I'm 23 female and this happened when I was stripping. I'm trying to keep this account as safe for work as possible, so there won't be anything graphic in here and respect to the trade. I know that may be refreshing to some and disappointing to others, but so be it, I guess. I was a waitress at the club for a while before I started dancing, so I knew the regular customers. When I started actually dancing at the club, it was a whole new monster. People that I knew treated me a whole lot differently, almost like I was a different person. I was no longer the waitress in the tank top and denim shorts. I was now the dancer with heels and lingerie. Totally different vibes once I crossed over. So there was this one customer. He was maybe a year or two older than me. I don't know much about him personally other than he worked at a hardware store and came in every other week with some work friends. He was nice, albeit a little bit on the shy side. One night, two of his coworkers decided to pay for a private dance for him. This would be where I came into the mix. Thing is, he just didn't want to get a lap dance once we got back there. He just sort of vented about his life and the girl that he was dating that he was sure was either cheating on him or didn't love him anymore. I just sort of sat there and listened. I didn't know what else to do. Once the time in the room was up, I walked him back to his table and gave him a hug and told him thank you for keeping me company. Then I went about on my regular duties. So this seemed to spark something in him. He messaged me on Facebook, which was a completely private account. He told me thank you for listening to him and asked if he could take me out for dinner. I told him that I had a boyfriend but that I appreciated his offer. Then the messages got more frequent over the next 2 days. He started asking me things like, "Why are you so evil?" I didn't respond and he started calling me a variety of slurs. I ended up just blocking him from Facebook because I was so creeped out by the switch in him that flipped. I opened my Instagram like a day later to an assortment of messages. One of them mentioned that if he ended up hurting somebody, it was going to be my fault and that his family would forever hate me. I blocked him from that too and called the police. The police didn't seem to follow up from my understanding. I was never told anything about it, but this happened within about a 4-day period or so I feel I should have heard something. I got lucky when I went back to work and he ended up showing up. He came over to me looking like he had been crying. Thankfully, I had notified our manager at the time and the head bouncer, who quickly apprehended him and phoned the police. To those that may ask, he was admitted for psychological treatment after the incident, and to my knowledge hasn't been released. I do hope that he gets the help that he needs and can one day possibly live a normal life again, but I can't help but feel that I dodged a bullet. Had I not told anyone, I could potentially be food for worms right now. I've since left stripping in order to pursue a different career, all unrelated to this one incident. I've had many weird experiences in the club in all my time working there, between waitressing, dancing, and bartending, but this is the one that always sort of stuck in my head. I've done well to move past it, but there is always just a lingering thought. My childhood was spent in Santa Ana, California. I have pretty good memories there before my dad moved us down to Texas. There is one weird instance that I remembered, so I asked my mom about it and will now share it with you. We lived in this decently sized apartment complex. We were on the 4th floor, but there were up to 5 to 6 floors that I can remember. One of our upstairs neighbors was this beautiful Chinese lady named Sheila, with the cutest Pomeranian puppy. She was young, thin, had long black hair, and had the prettiest eyes and wore the prettiest clothing. She would always call my sister and me over to play with the puppy. Sometimes she'd invite us inside her home. I remember her apartment seemed strange to me. All of her walls had shelves lined with porcelain dolls that I thought were very creepy. She also had Hello Kitty and Friends plushies all over her couch and even on her floor. She had a huge pink frilly rug. I remember that as a child something about her apartment seemed off, but I didn't care because I loved having a pretty older friend with a dog. Sheila took a particular liking to me. I'm Mexican American, but everyone has told me I look Asian. This should be relevant later. Anywho, she kept on telling me I looked just like her porcelain dolls and that I was so beautiful. I was flattered because I looked up to Sheila almost like an older cool sister. My sister and I started frequenting Sheila's apartment more often, mainly to play with the cute puppy. Her boyfriend started coming over more often. I remember thinking he was too old for her and too ugly. I would catch him staring at me a lot, and at the time I couldn't understand why, but he made me feel weird. One time I got into a huge fight with the neighborhood kids and my sister, so I stopped playing with them and decided to pay Sheila a visit. Sheila seemed off, like she didn't really want me to be there. She had these like pink see-through glasses, and I remember I could see purple makeup. But now that I think about it, it might have been a bruise. From the background I can hear her boyfriend say, "Let her come in. I have a painting for her." Sheila reluctantly lets me in. The entire flat was dark. All the blinds were closed and it was super messy inside. Her boyfriend then hands me a painting he made of Winnie the Pooh. It's not very well drawn and I don't really like Winnie the Pooh that much, but he says, "For you, because you are cute like Winnie the Pooh." I say thank you and quickly forget and start looking for the puppy. Once I find the puppy, I begin to pet it and cuddle it when I hear from behind something that I now know is moaning. I turn to Sheila and her boyfriend are full on making out. I remember it very clearly because I have never seen anyone, for example, my parents kissing so sloppily and with tongues. I felt embarrassed and just looked away and continued to play with the dog and pretended I wasn't paying attention, but it continued for way too long. I turn around once more and he is fondling her. At this point I feel very weird and just tell her I need to go and leave. Fast forward a few days later and it's my birthday. Sheila comes over to drop off my birthday gift and it's a porcelain doll. I pretend to like it and thank her and go back to playing with my friends. I can hear my mom talking with her at the doorway and my mom keeps saying no over and over again. She seems like she is getting angry but still trying to keep her composure. Finally, she shuts the door and gets back to the party. A few days later, I tell my mom that I'm going to Sheila's to play with her dog. She tells me no and to go play with the neighbor kids instead, and she doesn't want me going with Sheila anymore. I don't think much of it and go play with the kids instead. Fast forward a few weeks, I stop by Sheila's just to see that the apartment is empty. The blinds are open and I can see that the apartment is empty inside. Fast forward to today and my mom tells me something that shocked me. That day at my party, Sheila was asking me if she could take me to Beijing with her. That she would buy me whatever I wanted and that she wanted to show her family how a Mexican kid looked so much like them. I guess because I looked Asian in her eyes. She kept telling my mom that I could be a model and that she could possibly help me become one as well. My mom thought she was joking at first, but Sheila was persistent. My mom said she basically had to shove her out the door because she wasn't leaving or taking no for an answer. I'm not sure what Sheila wanted with me, if that was even her real name. I just hope wherever she is now that she's okay, and I hope she never truly meant to hurt me. So, just to clarify, I was 15, home alone, and lived on a Native American reservation at the time. Stuff would happen all the time. Hearing things, walking at night, you would see shadows, etc. The kids would call them skinwalkers. Besides the point, this was during the day my mom was at work, labor and delivery, and I, well, dropped out of school due to a medical situation. So, I had this huge window in my room. I'm talking really wide, taking about a whole section of one wall, just enough space to fit a vanity and my TV on both sides. I was chilling, smoking weed, and walking around my room. I showered at one point, so I changed. All while a man was sitting on a wooden post directly across from my backyard watching me. I didn't have curtains when we first moved in. They had ugly blinds hanging up. I tore them down immediately and put up really cool blankets, lol. And during the day I would tie them up so light would come in. Arizona is a beautiful state, so to see the desert every morning along with the sunrise is amazing. Hours passed and my mom comes home and we go to Taco Bell. I vividly remember being on Twitter in my room eating my cheese dillos when all of a sudden the light in the hallway went off. So I was like, okay, it's my mom. But then my door opened slightly and my mind was racing at that point. It was about 9:30 p.m. at night. My lights were off in my room and the only light was my phone. I start calling my cats names and we had 3, so that's when I see him. A tall man in a red baseball hat and jeans. I was going through a pretty hard time, so I had a depression pit going on and started screaming and throwing hangers and empty soda cans, screaming for my mom, who was home and whose room was right next to mine. She comes out, flips my light on, and there is nobody there. I'm telling her to call the police, and that there was a man in my room. So my mom gets her switchblade from her room and walks me through every room upstairs until we look down the living room from our balcony and see the blanket from our guest room on the floor. Then my mom looks up at me and says, "Stay back." Being that it was my mom, I held her hand and we ended up downstairs in the office room where the windows were wide open. To cut to the end, the man was arrested breaking into another home, and when asked about me, he was ready to kidnap me, etc., and was watching me. The neighbors called 911 because they saw him trying to get into our gated backyard. My mom saved my life a few hours before. I don't know what would have happened. Early autumn 1996, and I had just returned from a tour of the Falkland Islands with the RAF. Through a sequence of events involving my trade being signalized by the UK Ministry of Defence, I knew in advance that I was being discharged almost as soon as we got back to the UK, despite only serving 2 years. I still lived with my parents, male 20, but they had left the day before on holiday. Important later. I got unpacked, made a couple of calls, and headed straight out to see friends for the evening. We go to a quiz night and all the teams end up swapping papers for marking purposes, school style, except us. Somehow, we've still got our own answers. We proceed to improve our answers as the quizmaster goes through them, and surprise, surprise, we win. The prize is a bottle of white wine. Also important later. None of us touched the stuff and I'm driving anyway, but the whole silly cheating nonsense was funny. End of the night, I drive home and remember the security alarm was still set the way the previous owners had it. You had to go around the back to enter and get the 45-second window to turn off the alarm. The front door would just wake up the neighbors with alarm noise. I head around the back and I am fiddling for my door key in the dark garden when I realize something is up. There is no reflection in the window. It takes me a second to realize there is no window. Not smashed, not just there. I spin around, expecting someone behind me in the dark, but I'm alone. I become acutely aware of my winnings from the quiz night. A nice heavy weight in my hands, and I turn it over in my hand to use it like a club. I spot the window lying in the grass. It's a standard white UPVC, double glazing pane in its frame. So the whole piece that moves when you open the window has been removed. No mess and no damage. The careful placing of the window on the wet grass also means no fingerprints, so I am not reassured by the apparently professional approach. I turn back to the door and consider my next move. The door opens in the utility room, then the kitchen. The alarm panel is in the cupboard at the far end of the kitchen. Simple enough, except entering through the window would not have triggered the alarm. On the other hand, leaving the kitchen to enter the hallway would trip the PIR sensor, so the intruder, having entered via the window, must be in the kitchen where the knives are. I psych myself up, unlock the door and move quickly inside, fully expecting a fight. No one. The alarm is beeping its countdown quietly because I broke the contact when I entered. I head over and switch it off, but I'm still wired and decide I need to be sure that I'm alone in the house. I proceed to enter every room, switching on lights as I go, ready to club somebody with a cheap bottle of Chardonnay. I get to the last room, my parents' bedroom. I open it, light on, and the entire house goes dark. I'm so psyched up for a fight, and all my movie geek brain could think of was, Ripley, they cut the power. Private Hudson, what do you mean they cut the power? How could they cut the power, man? They're animals. The landline phone still worked just from the tiny voltage on the phone line, and the handset was in the bedroom, so I called the police. I waited right where I am. 15 minutes goes by and they arrive. My dad never had all the lights on at once, and I tripped the fuse. It turned out that my dad had the driveway repaved, and it was taking longer than agreed. He made the fatal mistake of saying, "I need you to finish, we're going away tomorrow." Facepalm. It was never proven, but I think the traveler types that did the work saw an opportunity. They apparently removed the window and saw that I had left the spare key right there on the windowsill. A blessing in disguise because they unlocked the door, set off the alarm, and had the neighbor call my uncle. He came around, found no one there, and rescued the house without noticing the missing window. Thanks for listening. Turns out I need that bottle more than the better teams, even if I didn't actually hit anyone with it.